Okay, so I totally pressed that by accident. I
I
am
was like,
so
what's
sorry.
happening?
I am so sorry. we
That
we
was
were
cool
about
though.
we were about ready at that point. We were just playing with it. Come on.
Yeah.
We were certainly overdue to start.
Yeah, that
Hello, everybody.
that was great. That was a great intro. Thank you,
It was quick.
RC, for putting that together. I really enjoyed that actually. I couldn't stop laughing because I was like, oh man, I fucked up. But anyway, it's great to be here with you four and with everybody else. This so far has been a real hit for the diehards of each of our sort of relatively modest platforms. So it's just an absolute privilege to be here with the three of you guys. Honestly, I really just I value this is very high value for me, quite selfishly. So, but tonight I'm in charge of emceeing and getting all this done. I still got to figure out how to share my screen, but this evening we're going to be or morning wherever you are. This episode, you might have seen the Greek, thanks to Sky. We're going to focus on techni, okay? So, meaning craft, skill, so on and so forth. Etymological root of the word, technology. We are going to each present a specific magical technique. And I'm really excited for this. I mean, they put it to me. They're like, okay, you're next. You're going to be, what's your topic? I was like, oh, let's do a technique each. We'll all do that. And then about a week ago, I was like, God damn it. I picked like the most complicated thing that you could possibly like do a 4-way podcast. But that's kind of, I'm constantly stepping in it. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what you all have to present.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. What else? Offer something for the peoples out there while I figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah, thanks, Ike, for being the front man for this month. That's always it's if I did it last month, and as you yourself understand as a musician, it's all well and good to be a front man, but you get a whole new appreciation for performance when you learn the joys of being a backup player and a harmonist and getting to just sort of nudge things subtly from the side. And so I'll try and nudge gently today and just enjoy the experience of getting to hang out with you wonderful guys. It's just such a great treat, like you were saying. Yeah, relatively I don't know, small presence on YouTube for a lot of the occult community. People have especially for practitioners, right? It does seem practitioners have a hard time growing on YouTube. Eleftheria cracked the algorithm when he rejected summoning demons famously and got a deluge of fundamentalist Christian subscribers, as he told me.
Oh, that's great.
I just was like, "Hey, congrats on your success." He's like, "Yeah, they're all Christians." Oh, that's more Kiwi accent. Sorry, but I don't know if that's literally true, man. But either way, yeah, doing this whole 4-way thing is very cool, and my people have liked it, and we'll keep it going. I'm looking forward to presenting a very cool technique for you all today.
Yeah. I made the mistake of going on like a relatively large podcast and talking about Gnosticism and Freemasonry. And this particular podcaster had a lot of like, I don't know, born agains, a lot of evangelical Christians. And my God, did they fucking hate me. It was like, there were like 8,000 comments in the chat about, whether it's the Illuminati or my nose is big or something to that effect. So it's I didn't have the same luck, even though I'm open about my Christianity and I reject goetic, chthonic, and demonic magic. But yeah, I mean that's the difference, it's like that. It's just, I think Eleftheria kind of sort of meets and responds to challenges and things like that. It's a very almost, it seems almost like a martial arts thing. Whereas I kind of just throw myself into fucking traffic all the time.
Well, you can handle it, fortunately.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of my channel's, history, I suppose. Yeah, it seemed good for the first few years. The growth seemed very healthy, and I think that, well, when Christians commented, it was more because they were hate watching and saying, I need Jesus and stuff. I get the feeling, but because it was all very magical. But actually, when I started talking more about Jesus, not as an evangelical preacher, but just from the esoteric perspective, like just mentioning Jesus, suddenly things started to slow right down. I know we've spoken about that before, but yeah.
And that's why we're starting it with talking about it again, right? Because we just love hitting that note in the algo.
Yeah. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have said the J word, but yeah. But I don't know. It's a bit of a mystery, really, the way that the algorithm works, and I think that the secret is just consistency and slogging it out for very little gain for the first few years. I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I look at my YouTube. I guess I'm not used to factoring into the Spotify plays too. I don't often look there. I just have my system of trying to get it out, but YouTube I'm a little bit more active on. And so the numbers are, compared to somebody, almost anybody else, my numbers are really low in terms of views and likes and engagements. Now, the interesting thing is, it's very strange to me, is that like I travel all over the world, and somehow every time I talk to somebody, they've listened to an episode of my podcast, or they have something to say about it. So it could be a case of it's getting out to the right people. I don't really know, but I'm going to keep doing it because I started it because I liked doing it. Somebody messaged me earlier today, and if they're watching, they responded to the newsletter I sent out this morning on demons, and I'm not trying to throw any shade here. It's just it's a great example. It's a great example. The guy was like, you do so much shit, I feel like you can buy locate. And I love to say, if I didn't appear to be magical, then what the fuck am I doing out here talking about I'm a magician, right? But the real thing is that a lot of people don't realize, like, and I think this is true for all of us, or in some facet or another. I was doing it this fucking hard for over 20 years. It's just now I'm in front of people. I'm on the internet. So it's like, it's a way of life, really. It's a way of life. That's, if you want to work the way any of us do, be able to speak on all this stuff like any of us do, you can't be a tourist. Like, I'm sorry, this isn't one of those things where you can go and buy all the shit, buy all the gear, and then all of a sudden pretend like you do this. It's like real will know real sort of situation. We're going to prove that tonight with techniques. All right. So I go ahead.
I do want to say first, before we move on, about Eleftheria. When you first started your channel, I was really nervous you'd get sort of not, a lot of channels just can't get past a couple thousand subscribers and just don't get any traction. I was really worried. I'm always worried when I see new channels come along that I like, that's what's going to happen. And so it was great to see that didn't happen. But I think a lot of it, of the credit for that, does actually have to do with how you approached it. And you should get credit for that. It's actually not all about the algorithm. Your approach of of being there on camera, having like, this is what pulled me into your channel right away, right? This is why I liked it, is because you were just talking face to the camera, giving your experiences, thoughts, feelings, knowledge straight up. And you started doing that at a time when YouTube, apparently we know now, was moving back toward that kind of content. And if you follow their creator updates, you can actually see that quite clearly, that was where they were returning to, away from the flashier, okay, so you can make sort of commercial corporate style production value as a solo YouTuber now. And that caused people to be less interested in that kind of thing. And you were really hitting that, and you were doing it consistently. So a ton of the, honestly, I think most of the credit goes to you and your courage to put yourself out there like that. Yeah, no, I think it's true. It really is true. And for anyone else wanting to do anything like what we're doing, I'd say that's a good way to go. It's something I certainly didn't feel comfortable doing, is just putting myself out there and being as open as you were. I still don't do that. I obviously still don't make videos like that. I've tried a few times, and I'll do more. But yeah, you really, I think your courage and your humility and your knowledge and experience really is what did it. And I think that should be highlighted for people, or at least just for you, bro.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Authenticity, I suppose, is key to the key with this kind of content, and that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be sharing our authentic experiences and knowledge on very specific techniques.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
we wanted
maybe
to
we
be
can...
a bit more touchy-feely for the audience, just so the audience knows. We wanted to be a bit more, experiential, kinesthetic. Go Kino on you.
Well, because you've got a bunch of practitioners sitting here, and there's enough talking heads just kind of, giving their thoughts and prayers to what's going on. So I think it'd be nice for people like us. Also, I don't really do stuff I don't demonstrate anything. I don't really teach anymore in that way on YouTube. I give courses now and I teach privately, but this would be nice to just offer something. I think maybe we can go around and talk about, and just really quickly just mention what we're going to discuss tonight. For my part, I'm going to talk about scrying, particularly with an obsidian mirror of some kind. So what about you, Eleftheria? What's your plan for tonight?
Well, Ike, my plan for tonight is to talk about a technique from the Lesser Key of Solomon. Everybody knows about the Goetia, but there's actually 5 books in the Lesser Key of Solomon, and one of them is the Ars Paulina, which is like a scrying technique to contact a person's natal angel, which is quite interesting, and I believe a very underrated part of the Western esoteric tradition. So I'm going to be going into a bit more detail on that.
Awesome. What about you, Frater RC? Can you guys can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about you then, Sky? What are you going to be talking about? That's all right.
I'm going to be discussing astral projection and etheric projection.
And I'm going to talk about something related to Sky's topic, but under the guise of Tatwas. And it'll be also in the form of a tribute to a recently departed great adept that some of us have known and or at least heard of. And our last conversation before he passed recently was on the topic of Tatwas. And he was a contributor to Regardi's The Golden Dawn. And one of our last chats was about how he did think Tatwas should be removed these days. And I spent a few hours giving him my argument why not. And I think I convinced him by the end. It's hard to say because it was very late at night and we were having a lot of fun. So that's what I'll tease.
Awesome. So this is a pretty this is going to be an intensive night, so we might as well get started because I don't know how long these presentations are gonna take. I'll be looking at questions in the sort of aggregated chat here that we have. It kind of feeds us certain comments from each of our channels, but we're going to save all the questions to the end so that everybody can kind of get through their piece. Then maybe the four of us will kind of just round robin if we have any questions to the person who just presented or comments. And then I'll just take a minute as moderator, look at the chat, see if anybody has any questions. So also, you know, it doesn't hurt to super thanks either. That might get you a little ahead in the world. Super chat. Okay. Let me see if I can pull this off. I'm not certain that I can, but I'm going to assume that I'm going to go to present, share screen, allow. Bam. Can you all see that?
I can't. You might have to add it to the stage. Here, let me do it.
Ooh.
There you go.
Hey. Sexy. All right. So I am going to talk about scrying this evening. This is a practice I really enjoy. There's many different types of scrying that you can do, but it certainly is one of the more ancient magical techniques or visionary techniques. It's a huge part of magic, dating all the way back to at least the PGM, right? The Greek magical papyri. So we're talking about several centuries BC and several centuries CE, particularly in and around the areas of Alexandria, Egypt, and even Thebes, actually, which is modern day Luxor. It's a collection of texts, and I'm sure most of you know, but just to reiterate, it's a collection of essentially. You've got one camp that thinks that they're these sort of renegade magicians for hire, and you got another, right? So that would probably be Stephen Skinner, and you've got another camp, David Frankfurter, who's a scholar as well. I'm not sure if he's a practitioner, but certainly a scholar, and he believes that more of these various texts over that several century, I think between 500 and 5 centuries to a millennium of different texts in that area. He believes that they were much more hieratic in nature, that they were actually priestly. I see evidence for both, right? Because these are, after all, hieratic, quite involved arts that require a stated relationship with these entities and these deities. One of the ways you can develop a relationship with, I recommend, an angelic entity, with I recommend I would say more exalted, less cosmic, more hypercosmic form of deity. One of the ways to do this is scrying. Okay, and it plays into dream work, it plays into ceremonial magic, but we do have scrying in the PGM, and that is typically well, I'll get into that a little bit later. The term scrying kind of throws people off, and really it comes from a Middle English term, to descry, meaning to catch sight of something, but it's etymologically related to the word describe. It's similar. So what essentially we're doing is we're attempting to catch sight of these entities, spiritual entities that are by their nature disembodied. Right? They don't necessarily automatically have one single uniform body the way we do. Human souls, according to this ancient tradition, are tethered for a time to a material vessel, which actually serves as a kind of tomb, a kind of cryogenic chamber for the sleep of the soul. But these entities that we attempt to interact with, and we'll get into why you would do stuff like this later on. But these entities that we attempt to interact with, they don't have strict material forms. They are disembodied intelligences that can present a form usually using the operator's available imagery. Okay, this is one of the reasons in esoteric orders we inculcate all these specific symbols, these symbolic vocabularies. It's just so that in the middle of a scrying session, you know, you don't see Big Bird in the mirror, because that's kind of what you've got in the junk file of your subconscious. Rather, you know, we use things like telesmatic images to sort of lay out our expectations for what any particular angel or entity should look like. That's a totally different but related technique. I won't go into that. But one of the ways that we do engage primarily with trying to create that state of receptivity, right? A lot of people believe that the imagination is something that like you're projecting, you're creating. It's like fantasy, you know, it's stream of consciousness. It has that function, certainly. But there is another function that practitioners of magic and mystics also know, that it is an organ of spiritual perception, of a receptivity. And that's what we're trying to bridge the two. We're using an activity to sort of understand, know things about the entity that we're about to contact, know the name, know how to call it forth, know your protocols, you know, for how do I do this as safely as possible? How do I put sufficient guardrails on this project so that I don't immediately become prey to delusion or a deceptive entity? Whereas the more passive function is going to be actually seeing, viewing the entity in some form of reflective surface. Okay. Now there are many ways to do, or several ways to do this. In the PGM, they would use these scrying bowls, okay, brass, sometimes silver. You could use crystal if you can kind of get your hands on that. That might not be great, because you could probably see your hands through the. You want as little distraction in your field of vision as possible. But what they would do is they would hold this rather shallow bowl of clear water up like this, and they would sit and stare over it, but they would drip oil. There would be many times they would just use olive oil, drip oil on the surface. It creates this sort of hyper reflective sheen and kind of intimates specific shapes and things of this nature. Iamblichus would have described something like this as the oil and the water working together to trap the light, to draw in the light to the surface of your scrying bowl. You are most likely all familiar with the crystal ball, right? I went to Atlantis bookstore in London. I went there 2 years ago, and I got to see they have quite a collection of original Golden Dawn items, and I got to come this close to Dion Fortune's original scrying ball. It was absolutely incredible. However, I don't use the ball method. It don't work for me. I just kind of like, I can't get into that receptive state. What really works for me is I have a 16-inch polished obsidian mirror that is concave. And I keep that wrapped in a linen cloth that is specifically black with sigils embroidered on the inside. Believe it or not, not the outside, the exterior of the wrappings, but the interior. And then I keep that inside a locked case, because effectively, anytime you utilize and consecrate, really by use in many ways, consecrate this kind of device, you're creating a window into another world. Okay. And that's effectively what it is. We'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. Oops, I always do that, gang. There we go. Okay. So I'm not, I talked a little bit about this. This is from a presentation I gave a couple of years ago at Esotericism and Freemasonry. I gave a workshop on scrying. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, because there's all sorts of juicy bits that you can learn from me, but not for free. And this part kind of this slide serves to attempt to explain the function of the imagination as an organ of spiritual perception. This is not entirely just complete strict psychological stuff going on here. It's not just you casting an image, and you know, like a lot of the Jungians would say, well, what that image says is meaningful to you, and it's reflective of your subconscious. That's not what we're doing. And when you have the experience, when you have the phenomenology under your belt, you understand that this takes on an autonomy that is existentially jarring, startling to your like how you understand your reality. The only thing that I remember thinking the first few times is how is this happening? I'm not thinking this. And there is an objectivity to whatever is appearing, whatever you call forth. Is that going to happen right out of the gate? I don't know. There are ways to test for delusion and things of this nature. So you're going to hear me from now on referencing the imagination as the imaginal, right? Because I want to separate the rest of this presentation from the negative stigma of the imagination as something that is fake or contrived or self-generated. I'm going to use it in the way that Henry Corbin, the great religious scholar and translator, he fitted this term. He didn't coin it, but he fitted this term in an academic milieu while he was translating ancient Iranian sort of spiritual, metaphysical texts. They might have been Sufi, actually. I can't remember just now. And he said, you know what? The imagination just does not cut it. It does not cut it. There's too much there. So I'm going to call it the imaginal. And it's a faculty now. As a matter of fact, in magic, it's one of the 4 powers of the soul. So some famous scryers, at least in the Western world. John Dee was actually not a scryer, but he is most commonly associated with these scrying sessions. He was a great ritualist, a great scholar, a great occultist. However, not a great scryer. He had to employ people to do it for him. Most of the time, he had Edward Kelly come in for the angelic communications. And I'm sure you guys all know the story there. Frederick Hockley is another one who's very underrated. His works are kind of collected in the Rosicrucian Seer. It's a book from the Foundations of the Golden Dawn series. Amazing series that collects unpublished letters. R.A. Gilbert mostly. I think Alec Howe published one or guest edited on one. They collect all these letters of these people that were associated with the Golden Dawn. And Frederick Hockley was a mentor and friend to Kenneth Mackenzie, who we know is somehow embroiled in that, Society of 8, early Egyptian Freemasonic thing that was going on at the time of the Golden Dawn. He claimed to have studied with Eliphas Levi for a short while. So the Rosicrucian Seer has a lot of really cool stuff on Frederick Hockley's scrying techniques. However, he also was not a scryer. He had to employ young chambermaids to view this, to be able to view this stuff for him. So sometimes people have this gift. Other times you got to get somebody else to do it. Luckily, as a friend of everyone here, most likely, David Rankine, he likes to point out these things work best most of the time when you have one person doing the ceremonial invocation, and you have another person sitting there scrying and, jotting down what they're seeing. So if you can't do that, that's fine. I normally don't do that, but historically, that's how a lot of this stuff worked. There was, an invocator, a sort of somebody playing the position of a hierophant or an invoking priest, really. That would more so be a hierarchist, but and then somebody doing the seeing or scrying. So there's a couple of risks that are associated with scrying and any kind of imaginal work. The first one being delusion. You might follow yourself down this really interesting, subtle, persuasive, dangerous psychological route that somehow makes you feel like you're some grand special wizard who is now in the company of the august company of angels, things of this matter, when in reality it could all be pure fantasy, which again is not what this technique actually is, if it's to be efficacious. Addiction is quite interesting, in particularly in visionary work in general. There's kind of a mysterious or dark allure to these kinds of practices. Again, I believe it's I think it's actually in Ritual Magic in England. Francis King, he talks about how Robert Falcon had a group of people in the Bristol Temple who got so addicted to sort of like, and this is relevant to what we're all going to talk about, they got so addicted to like astral travel and scrying that I think that the chapter dedicated to that era of Falcon's sort of career as a chief of the Splinter Order, it's called the Falcon's Astral Junkies, and he describes them very similar to like this flophouse junkie situation, except they're constantly going into vision. So there actually is there's also overload that can come with addiction. Deception's a little different, right? Delusion is probably self-deception, whereas deception, the way that I'm contextualizing it here, has more so to do with, well, maybe it worked. Maybe you summoned something. Maybe there's something in that class. But there's always the possibility when you are working with things that are disembodied by nature, there's always a possibility that things on the other side of the veil are not being truthful. I like to think of it this way. If a person whom I know, perhaps maybe a decade, and I can see in front of me, can lie to me and get away with it, why the fuck couldn't a spirit? So I have a very healthy skepticism of all spirits, and the Golden Dawn teaches certain ways of testing them. And still, I keep them all at arm's length, really. The last thing, two-way traffic. Again, I've told you how I seal up my mirror. There's another technique, a simpler technique. It's called using the lightning flash. I do that with a particular oil. We'll get to that later. But there's potential two-way traffic. What do I mean by that? Do I mean something's going to like climb out, like coming out of like one of those black Acme holes from like, I don't know, the Roadrunner cartoons? That's not going to happen necessarily. But you can get astral bleed. I've experienced that. And actually, years ago, my fiance and I, we removed all mirrors from our bedroom. We sleep better. These are potential portals for somebody that is more active and does this work, and it can create astral bleed. Things can seep into your dreams, and that might sound like fun for somebody who doesn't do this all the time. For somebody who does this all the time, you need to keep the healthy boundary between these experiments and the rest of your life, especially if you have kids, you have a wife, a husband, whatever it is. You're going to want to just be cognizant that there's a proper way to store this stuff and seal it. When and why should we scry? Well, always use divination. I always use divination to see if it's even necessary to scry. You find whatever you use, whatever divinatory technique is best for you. So the main reason it would be to attain knowledge we can in no other way attain. Okay. Another reason is to approach a deity or other spiritual entity. Why would we want to do that? Well, if we're thinking about this theurgically, there should be a divinizing effect. And this is just kind of like a Zoom call. You'll eventually get in a room, so to speak. But first, these are usually preliminary. When you want to draw in and begin working with a deity, an angel, some form of spirit, you want to first use this buffer. Why? We'll see, because this is contained. There's actually a magical container that your scrying device goes into, and we're going to discuss that. To obtain theophany, from the Greek word theophania, the revelation of the deity when other measures have not been forthcoming. So if you've used fluid condensers, if you've done ceremonial magic and it's looked like there's a goddamn grease fire in your oratory because of how much incense you've burned so that you can give it some sort of, subtle mass to take form. If you've invoked an angel or a spirit for your dreams and none of that has worked, then you try scrying. There are considerations, the first and foremost being mental health. If you have a history of mental illness of any kind, I do not recommend you ever do this, period. That's my imperator hat going on there. Lunar cycles. Now, well, here's the thing. Mental illness, it's dicey, right? Because that could be depression. But if you have something that's relatively severe in terms of identity, if you disassociate, if you suffered from schizophrenia, if you have a sort of manic disorders, even something like bipolar, I would encourage people to not play with this stuff. Lunar cycles. Best time to scry is in the waxing or full periods. Okay. It's not only traditional that we do invocations and evocations in that way, but there is a whole theory of how there is, well, first of all, you're less likely to get chthonic interference from a dark entity. And also, there is a theory that there is a greater volume of what we call etheric tide, and that goes into the Tattvic hours, really, the Tattvic tides. They seem to be fuller and more. There's a greater volume, greater buoyancy in the full moon period and the waxing full period. Okay, so I would say if you're going to really nail this and drive it home and refine it, do it in a waxing gibbous, or you've got like a 3-day period for the full. Understand this kind of vision work, this kind of magic is the energies that you're working with, the things that you are rousing in your psychic faculties. They have an etheric counterpart. It's like trying to move one side of a coin without moving the other. You move the imaginal, you're moving the ether. And the more you've trained your organism to be able to do this, the more power you have. That's how magicians become so skilled at specific things that they don't even have to do complex rituals. But this energy is specifically, it's the same energy as your sex drive. Okay. It is intimately tied to the sex drive. So if you have issues of compulsion in this area, be aware that this will likely exacerbate it to one degree or another. All right, so the materials we want to use are, you can use crystals, water, and oil. You can do fire, right? There's fire scrying. I don't do that. I kind of zone out when I'm scrying, and I don't want to zone out with fire in the room. You can use a mirror. That's what I use. It's effectively obsidian glass. You want a protection sort of container that we refer to as the triangle of art. Okay. This has precedents that do go back to the Greek magical papyrion. More curiously, the Pergamum triangle of Hecate, which dates to the 3rd century, that was found in Pergamum, which is now modern day Turkey. It's a very, very cool artifact. I recommend you go and check it out. Actually, you know what? Hold on. I've got mine right here. This is not consecrated for magical use. This is just an artistic version, and I'm going to show it right here. So this is a replica of it. I believe it's in it's either in silver or brass, and it's got the triform Hecate and words of power here in Greek and Coptic. So very, 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 very cool. It would have had a little stem right here in the middle that you would sit something on, or you'd place a bowl on, or something to that effect. This is a magical container, specifically for restriction and binding. This is protective things so that things don't seep out. Okay. You will likely see that when Frater Eleftheria starts talking about his methods, because this is a huge part of the grimoire tradition. It's a huge part of Solomonic magic. We call it the triangle of art. So those are the basic things that you're going to need. Here's a nice example of how you would do this. You've got 3 circles, a triform sort of nested circular system here. These are actually supposed to be specific colors. I believe red on the outside, green on the inside, and I think black in the center here. I'll double check that in a minute. and then you would have the names of the 4 archangels. You would have various divine names. There are several that you can use, or you could just write them inside the triangle. I prefer actually to use the circle around me and keep the triangle out, like on a tiny little stand, like a desk. Not really a desk. It's like a little platform thing. And I keep it just outside of the circle, but close enough so that I can gaze into it. Okay. That's, you don't have to do it that complicated. I'm like the magical version of Howard Hughes. You go wash my hands. You know, I'm like a magical germaphobe when it comes to this stuff. Here's a really nice version where they've embedded the scrying, the obsidian mirror into. So this is a more traditional, you know, you've got a triangle of art because of the names that you have here. I think it's what anafaxeton, primeumaton, and tetragrammaton. That's how you will find that usually in the grimoires in one iteration or another, those words. And then Mikael they've got here, who is the angel of protection, right? He's the one who casts Satan out of heaven. And here's the thing. A lot of this stuff is based on, and I'll let Eleftheria go into this, but a lot of this is based in a specifically Judeo-Christian milieu. Okay, so you'll be using a lot of those angelic names for protection. You might even be calling one of them into the mirror. If you are to work with something that is archangelic, I would say once you confirm that it is what it's telling you it is, once you have satisfied that, I wouldn't use the I would not. I don't like to bind angels, so I would not have to use it anymore if I were specifically re-evoking this particular entity in the mirror. You usually do that by getting a symbol from them or a word. How may I reach you again? You know, it's like we're on a payphone. What's your landline? You know, it's one of these kinds of things, and you'll work that out for yourself. I don't have the time. So the receptive state. Let's say you've got your thing set up, right? You're in your robe, you're in your whatever it is, your Tao robe. I like to use my priestly vestments. I have a clerical ordination in a line. I will use the stuff that I would use for exorcism in terms of regalia, and then I sit, you know, do all my fumigations. I use hyssop and consecrated holy water to asperge, and then I would sit down. First I would do my ritual techniques, and you evoke it from the mirror. You're calling it forth using various names and formula, and then you sit. And this is going. You don't just call these things once. You call them till they come, one way or another. Okay, it's not this thing where it's like, well, I've put it out into the ether. You call them until they come. It's like if I really need to get in touch with RC, I just keep calling him till he picked up, you know. And look, and sometimes they're not available, so you leave a message. You try again at the best next time. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you suck at magic because your first time you didn't get anything. Try again. See what you did wrong. Writing all this stuff down in a journal afterwards is super important to check and see, like, well, okay, what was the chain of signal? Where did I go wrong here potentially? So at this point, you'd get into the receptive state, but it's gonna, you know, a lot of people need some training for that. I use meditation. I like mindfulness and body awareness types of meditation. They tend to really, really get me to that point where I'm receptive, meaning I kind of lose sensation from the neck under. And at first that can be a little scary, but you just got to let the body go. Just be okay with it. It's part of feel the fear and do it anyway. This is part of you, especially when you astral travel. You got to be okay with leaving your body. You know, that is freaky. So, and the field of vision becomes 360 somehow. I can't explain it. I don't know how, but my field of vision is 360 degrees in all directions. I enter into a state where things can come forth with ease and with clarity. So this is what mindfulness meditation, this practice, since I've been doing this since I was 15 years old. That's I would never ever give up like that permanently. I've had times where like I don't do it as often, I fall off, but I would never ever stop meditating forever. I feel like you must do that in conjunction with this kind of a practice to, you know, if you don't already have this tremendous gift of inner vision. Astrovision, right? You're going to be using the imaginal. Energy work also helps. I wrote a book about it, Etheric Magic. There are postures you can use and ways that you can stimulate the energy of what we would call in Chinese medicine yin tang, and what is essentially the third eye in the Western tradition. You can use mantra to drown out the noise. I'm not going to give you a mantra, but you can find one. I mean, sometimes it could just be the name of the angel or the name of the entity that you're invoking. Fasting is extremely important for all this stuff. You don't want to have just like slammed the new, what is it called? The Archburger or something like that. With all the McDonald's controversy that's out there now, you do not want to have slammed a bunch of fast food while you're driving to, like, I don't know, the storage unit where all your magical shit is. But okay, you do not want to do that. You need to fast. Do you need to fast like you're in prison? No. Moderation, right? Because at the same time, you're going to be moving and stimulating and awaking vast energies that will effectively drain you. And you could be, there's a danger that you risk becoming incapacitated if you can't, you know, if your blood sugar drops, if you can't hold this energy. It's really like holding a tension, like almost, it's a sexual tension that you're holding. Sleep deprivation works really well. I do not recommend this. I must say that again. I do not recommend that you use sleep deprivation, but it works. So, for me, you always want to proceed this by ritual. You never want to just, let's pull out the old obsidian glass and sit it on the living room table. Always preceded by a ritual. I use the Solomonic circle and triangle. Those are my protections in place. I do a banishing or a warding, really, and then an invocation for protection. And then you want to be seated before the mirror within your circle with the glass just outside. So what I do here now is I close my eyes. I got my face oriented toward the mirror like this. I close my eyes and I begin rhythmic breathing. And that's just the fourfold breath. I breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then with an empty pair of lungs, hold. Okay. And I just do that until I finally can sort of hit that spot where from the neck down, I've lost most sensation or like connection. You can use mantra at that point, calling the angel's name or whatever you're invoking. Then you want to open your eyes when you're ready. And you don't want to look. What you're going to try and do is you're going to try and activate your active vision and be looking for it the way you would be like, where did I park my car? You know, like hyper vigilant, kind of like what. That's not the way this works. The way this works is that you soften your gaze as if you are staring, because the thing is not actually appearing in the mirror. The thing is appearing to you in the eye of your mind. You are using this as a prompt and as a canvas on which your imaginal faculty will contact and be able to successfully have this thing come into view. And you just soften your gaze and continue to call and continue to breathe. You don't want to get worked up. Now, before we go into testing the entity, what I would do also at this time is I would have a pencil in my hand. Okay. I would have several pieces of consecrated paper. And if and when I did make contact with the entity and I began to ask it questions, what its name was, so on, of its nature, if it told me anything it told me, I would be writing down. I'm not breaking eye contact with the mirror. So it's very important. You have a very big piece of paper and plenty of it. You could develop a shorthand. That seems a little involved for me. So there are various invocations, prayers, and forms of interrogation that are associated with testing the image and the entity. There are specific symbols. The first are geometric. Okay. You can use the cross, the rose cross. Okay. Some people choose to actually have a crucifix and show it to the being in the mirror to see what their response is. Others simply trace with a wand or a dagger in before the mirror on its surface, as it were, without actually touching and scraping it. A pentagram, either a banishing pentagram or an invoking pentagram, see what the response is. The second thing is, and I'm only giving a few here because I don't want to take up too much time. I think I've already gone for about a half hour. But the next set of symbolic tools that we're taught to use in the Golden Dawn are the Hebrew double letters, specifically the ones that are corresponded to the planets. Okay. So you have you would inscribe these before the image. And now I'll just say this: if the image sort of dissipates, or if it becomes hideous, or if it becomes aggressive, or if it just completely fades, something was not where you wanted it to be. Okay. Like something was wrong. You didn't necessarily do anything wrong. You did something right by testing it. Now, if you inscribe one of these before the figure, the Golden Dawn papers say that if the being is true, the image will become more vivid. I haven't necessarily have had that experience an overwhelming amount of times. Normally, just nothing will happen. It'll stay strong and nothing will happen. Okay, so you would use the following letters to test for each. Bait, right? So the equivalent of the letter B, Mercury. This is for intellectual untruth, typically lying to yourself. Is this a delusion? Gimel, the correspondence to the letters C or G. This is a lunar symbol, and this has to do with trouble with concentration. And I'm getting all of these directly from J.W. Brody Innes of the Golden Dawn. Daleth, the equivalent of D, corresponding to the planet Venus. Enticement or pleasure, or enticement of pleasure. What did I say about the psychosexual energies? So if you see some, if you're calling forth Hecate and you see some Venusian nude sort of sensual look, and you could laugh, but it happens. I would test it immediately with Daleth, or the planetary symbol of Venus, and to see if this was, I don't know. It's I am but a man. I'm a hot-blooded man. Kaf. The equivalent of the letter K, planetary correspondence is Jupiter. Imagination. Are you creating? Are you projecting this rather than receiving it? That's how I interpret that signification. Pe, corresponding to the letter P and F. Mars, anger. Okay. Let's say you are you're really pissed off at somebody and you're doing a ritual. Either, God forbid, to get back at them, or just an unrelated ritual, and there's some sort of anger in your what we call your personal ruach, which is your psyche. There's something there creating interference and therefore generating a figure that is not true to what you want to be calling forth. Resh, the sun, testing for vanity. Does this make me feel really special that I'm talking with Metatron, the voice of God? Tav, Saturn, interference by memory. Is this something subconscious that you are creating a form based off of an ex-lover or a parent that you didn't get an overbearing parent, things of this nature. So these are a myriad ways. These are not the only ways to test them, but they're probably the most readily available. Hockley, for instance, has a litany of questions specifically concerning their relationship to Christ. D has that too. Okay, he's got his own ways of kind of stopping every 5 minutes in some of his records to pray in the middle of the sessions and pray to the highest God and invoke Christ. If that's not your path, right? I don't need everybody to be a Christian just because I'm a Christian. If that's not your path, you can use something that's a little bit more, just general and planetary, geometric. There are other scrying symbols. You can use the tattvas. You can use the Western elemental symbols, right? Fire, air, water, and earth. I would use them in their elemental colors. And then like the tattvas, you can scry the sub-elements. Fire of air, water of earth, air of air, air of water. Okay. there's a whole system for that. It's a different technique, but you can look into it. Just type the sub elements of the tattvas or the sub elements of Western magic. You can scry planetary symbols. You can scry zodiacal symbols. You can scry tarot cards, which is a lot of fun. You can use the tarot cards, which is as something we refer to as sharim, gateways. They become this sort of picture that you enter, and you can walk around and observe the astral environs there. Here's a good one for the sun. The last thing I want to say, okay, Kabbalistically, I mentioned something, the ruach of the person, the personal ruach. You may summon something. You may have a conversation. This may go swimmingly, and there still might be one final element, which is the personal ruach, which are the lower 7 planets on the microcosmic tree of life that correspond to the psyche of the person, their interior wants, needs, emotions, thoughts, memories, desires, conscience, so on and so forth. We call this personal interference. And no matter what comes through, there is always a little bit. Effectively, the light of the being, the light of the spirit, or perhaps the information enters and passes through the ruach, the psyche of the individual, and then here grounds itself in the outer persona. As it passes through these planetary spherot, as we conceive of them as psychic powers, psychic elements of the self, they are tainted. They are colored. Okay, they're colored in some form by our understanding, the way we have interpreted this. Like a lot of times, you don't get somebody who says, "Yeah, okay, so on this day, Iran's gonna go." You don't get that a lot of times. You'll get good information, but you'll get it in symbols. They could be right in front of you and all of a sudden put an image in your head, and it's stark. It doesn't belong there. It's intrusive. It's vivid. Boom. How do I interpret that? So there are many ways that you will receive information. It's not as cut and dry as I'm just talking, like having a conversation with a spirit. Sure, sometimes that can happen, but a lot of times not. And in those interpretational moments, those moments of reception, there is danger that your personal ruach, your personal psyche will somehow filter and change the message. This is why, and I end on this, if you channel, I recommend do not write books on what you received. Tell us about the technique. Tell us about the history of it. But no, the things that you derive from these scrying sessions are for you. They're not for the world. Okay. So I do not recommend that you go off the chain there. If you were interested in any of the little tidbits that I gave here, I'm offering a course right now. It's meeting every other Monday called Techniques of Greco-Egyptian Theurgy. We will learn fully how to scry from the traditional water and oil method, along with 20 other techniques of ceremonial magic that are specific to the Hellenistic and Greco-Roman periods of Egypt. You want to know more about that? Hit me up, IkeBaker.com, IKEBAKER.com. There's a little chat widget in the bottom right corner of my screen, or your screen. Whatever you type in there goes to my personal inbox. So just message me there, and I can tell you more about the course. All right. I don't know how to stop presenting. So, here we go. Here we go. All right. So that was a doozy. I didn't really know what I was totally going to be talking about, but I just went through the slides and let it fly. I hope it wasn't too much.
No, that was great. That was epic. And yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
I kept an eye because I know we'll be tight for time today. I just have that feeling. And now we know for sure we will be, of course, because we got a lot to do. But I kept an eye out for questions that were pertinent, so we could just do them. It's a wild chat today. I've put a few people in a timeout. Don't spam people. Don't spam the chat. Come on, let's have fun. But
Haide, Theon.
Yeah.
Theon, meet dad. I see somebody's writing.
So the one question that really stood out was, someone asked, why did you put astral in quotation marks? And I think that is actually a really good question, because
Mhm.
it's a word we use a lot and we rarely
Exactly.
define.
Yeah.
So over to you.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. Normally, when I give the full version of that presentation, there half the audience is assuming I mean one thing, and half the audience is assuming another, because we come from even though we're a small-ish community, we do tend to come from vastly different traditions sometimes, or at least traditions that are interpreting the same or similar material in vastly different ways. So a lot of people think when I say astral, I mean like the body of light. Okay, if you're looking back at the ancient Greek, sure, astron, right? Plato and Aristotle say that the soul is of a starry nature; it has a starry vehicle. That's not the way I'm using it, and this is what happened when you hear when you read Eliphas Levi talk about the astral light, when you hear Blavatsky talk about the astral bodies and things like this. Uh, they mean that starry kind of what I call the etheric field. Now, after Blavatsky died, right, she appoints Alice Bailey, but Leadbeater and Annie Besant kind of challenge Alice Bailey's authority as the successor to the Theosophical Society, and they begin writing all these treatises that become wildly popular. I mean, I still recommend, even though the guy was a pervert and he was probably a pedo, I still recommend people read what Leadbeater wrote on the chakras. Haire theon miter polionime kaligenithle haire ekati. Oh, okay. Why are people writing Greek in the chat? Okay, so to get back on that, what they do, what Besant and Leadbeater do, is they start using astral in a different way. They're not talking about the etheric anymore. They reoriented to the imaginal faculty. And when you hear Dion Fortune, when you read Crowley, when you read Regarty and the later traditions of these people were extremely influenced by theosophy, extremely. You couldn't not be. When you hear those writers, the sort of second class of the Golden Dawn, really Regarty, Fortune, so on and so forth, when they say the word astral, they mean the imaginal, right? There's an astral plane. That is the plane of the imagination. Part of it corresponds to Yesod on the tree of life. So I usually put that in quotations to say, okay, it used to mean one thing. In modern parlance, like post Blavatsky, most people working in this milieu are actually referring to the imaginal. Hope that answers it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed a lot of the things you talked about. You covered a lot of ground, so it's hard to pick anything to go back and forth on, really.
Yeah, I mean, I went over.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, hey, the reason we have a structure is the same reason we have a set list, so we can ignore it if we need to, and that's all right. Mine can be shorter. That's totally fine. So I'll take the hit on time if we need it, and I can go last even, so that you guys can have as long as you want, Sky and Eleftheria.
I'll hang to the end.
I wanted to say it's interesting to hear that you focus on Black Mirror scrying, and also it was really interesting to hear how you keep it and all of that. I'm one of those rare copper bowl scryers, actually. I hammered out a copper bowl in shop class in Waldorf school in like grade 9. Wow. And we were all, the teacher actually gave us all squares of copper and a hammer, and you just that's what we did for many weeks.
That's
we
amazing.
Just worked on our copper bowls. You start in the center, start hammering in a circle, and it's a square, but by the time you're done, it's circular. And here, I'll show you what I did, actually. I don't mind showing mine. It's not.
And just while he's gone, just to fill the dead air, I believe personally, making stuff like this the way he did is way better than acquiring. I'm not saying acquiring is invalid, but I'm certainly saying because he made this thing, that is going to be a potent thing that is connected to him, for the rest of its life.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. And the reason I was surprised, so it was so interesting actually how it was almost like if this happened to me now, I would see it as, the angels doing it or the spirits doing it, because I had just recently seen that old film, which is a good one, of the old Nostradamus movie, and he was using a scrying copper bowl, and he had a ridge on it, and then he had the water in it, of course, and I think he was using herbs, a lot of nutmeg and stuff. Anyway, so I modeled it off the one I saw in the movie because it was such a powerful film, that old Nostradamus film. And so here it is, and so here's the back side of it. So there you go. It's not huge. It's not huge. Doesn't need to be. And so, and yeah, that's what I've been using this since 1994 for scrying.
Amazing.
And, yeah, a lot of kids didn't take this project so seriously, and I think my woodshop teacher, Mr. Gunter Schneider, yeah, that's his name. Been a long time since I thought of him. He was probably very surprised how seriously I took this project. But I ended up getting more into workshop class and finished my graduation project. I carved a 8-foot tall Celtic cross crucifix that I then crucified myself to for my graduation project. It was a fun time. And so this is the scrying bowl I use. I fill it with, special water if I can. Otherwise, I'll use what I have. But my practice has evolved. So originally I would then also trace the sigils and the names. I would just write them with my finger or my wand around the side of what spirit I was working with and put the water in. And for years, I just focused on the surface of the water to see, what I got out of it. I was very early days in those in that time. But eventually I came to realize that the scrying bowl wasn't so much for me to have. In the beginning you're looking for flashes of light or real physical phenomena, but that just wasn't something. And then I joined the Golden Dawn and I started learning more than I had known from my early training through Llewellyn books and transcendental meditation and all of that stuff. And reading Regardie's Tree of Life, that was a seminal book for me from when I lived in an OTO house when I was 10, right? Weird times. But recently, in the last 5 years, since getting more into Stephen Skinner's work and the Grimoire Revolution and all of that, I started experimenting. And what I started experimenting with was adding oils to the water, which is something I had done in the past, but not so much. And the real breakthrough came when I started seeing the scrying vessel as a home for the spirit. Just like, when someone mentioned wants to hear a bit about Enochian in the future, and we could do a whole one on Enochian. We could do a whole session on that, and we probably should. But the real shift came when I realized that this was creating a space for a spirit to stick around and to have a home, so I could communicate more clearly. And once I started doing that, the scrying sessions became much more prolonged and clear, but also it became useful as a receptacle when I was doing even tarot readings for people, especially if I was doing multiple tarot readings, or heaven forbid 10 hours of tarot reading straight, which occasionally I do for they make it worth your while, and it is fun. By the end of the night you feel like high as fuck, just on spirit from interacting with all these different people's energies. So the breakthrough came when I started adding oils, but also thanks to Stephen Skinner's publications, I learned to experiment by putting my crystal ball in the bowl. I had never done that before, and giving it a wash with the essential oils, sort of creating a fluid condenser type of situation. And that just became a really, sometimes it looks like it's glowing while I'm doing my rituals. And it and then to top it off, so when I'm doing Shem Angel work, I don't use this wax tablet anymore, so I don't mind showing you. I'm making a new one, but then I would put this on top of my wax tablet for Shem.
There you go.
and put that there, and it creates quite a powerful little nexus for
Mhm.
energy. And
Mhm.
yes, to test spirits, I would indeed hold up my big Celtic crucifix.
Yeah, I use a
For
rose. I
meditation.
use a rosary actually, but I know that's not for anyone. Well, everyone. I know the one thing that I do want to say is actually that it's a little bit more involved, but I will typically anoint the mirror before I begin to scry with a rosemary oil or mugwort oil. Or sometimes, and now I make all this stuff. We grow rosemary in the front yard. Mugwort grows all over by the park over here. So we'll take it and dry it out, and Nicole will make tinctures and things out of it. And I'll, of course, be making moon juice, like magical oils and ointments and stuff. And you put the dried up plant material in a decent volume of virgin olive oil, and you put that in a double boiler situation, and you just let it condense for like 3 to 4 hours. And then you could consecrate it and do things like that. Now, the mugwort specifically, and here's the reason I bring this up. For me, I've done, like everyone here, I've done a million different types of magic. The most powerful magic I've ever, to this day, that I've ever experienced has to do with plants. They can just be in the room, and crazy shit, especially mugwort with the dreaming life. So what I'll do a lot of times, I'll take the mugwort with a specific finger and just rub it in to the third eye area until I feel that start to vibrate. It actually feels like somebody's blowing on it in a little whirlpool kind of motion when it's good and ready. And I will either use the mugwort oil to anoint the mirror, or rosemary oil, because I got that from Rankine in his Grimoire Encyclopedia. I thought that was kind of cool to experiment.
Yeah, that all sounds really really cool. Like you guys describing your scrying techniques and stuff, and thank you for that, Ike. I had a couple of questions or contributions, I suppose. In my experience scrying, I'll usually use a crystal ball, sometimes an obsidian mirror, but I really resonate with what you said about how the mirror or the crystal or whatever it is really just something for you to kind of use as a basis for seeing things in your mind. You didn't quite say it like that, but more or less is what you were saying. Because what I've found is when I'm scrying, the crystal ball, for example, it might be like a point of focus at first, but then quite often I'll find it when I'm in the zone, I just close my eyes and the images come kind of just in the mind's eye. But so it's not necessarily that there's anything special about I mean, maybe there can be if it's a very charged. I mean, it certainly adds something to the ritual to have this talismanic kind of object that can connect you to those realms. But I think, yeah, it's kind of an aid in something that's going on in your own mind. That's at least in my experience. But having said that, when it is just looking into your mind's eye, it's like there's a lot more interference that can happen. Like your mind can interfere a lot more. Whereas like when you're looking into an object, like a scrying mirror, and an image pops up, it's, it takes a lot of effort to draw something through an object like that. So the things that I've been able to, when I'm actually scrying and properly looking at the object, the information, it's harder to get, and it comes out sometimes letter by letter, but it seems to be more reliable than just looking inside. So I wondered if you had anything to say on any of that, and also just in terms of when we receive things, when we receive information, it being personal. I think that can be true a lot of the time, but sometimes I feel the spirits do want us to share things with other people, and they usually tell you if they do.
Mhm.
but also that's kind of what happened with Dee and Kelly. When they were receiving the tables of Lower Gaiath, they said, this will restore the holy books. So like the implication was that they wanted that information to be shared. But I think it can be wise to keep information like that under wraps until at least the appointed time when it's appropriate to share. But
Well, yeah, and Dee and Kelly didn't have Facebook. That's like a major thing is the virality of stuff I found that it can really, things can get out of hand now in a way that they just couldn't have in the past. And but it's all, I totally agree with what you're talking about in terms of it's all of this stuff, even like the correspondences of the Tree of Life. It's all scaffolding. It's scaffolding, now one of the, and I want to toss it back over to you, Frater Eleftheria, after I say this last piece, because I'd like to hear how I think you mentioned in the chat that what you were going to cover would dovetail nicely with what I just talked about. So maybe you'll go next. But I had through guided visualizations with the temple chief of my Golden Dawn temple, way back when. Very, very early, we did these trainings where we would, use I was doing path working as a neophyte, and that kind of stuff. And I remember the first time that I was introduced and I had this experience, on the astral or in the astral with a sort of I hate using this word, but like a spirit guide, a teacher, a tutelary spirit. And, I couldn't even understand how this thing, which was in my mind somehow, had just the most complete autonomy and this vividness that was almost threatening to outshine my vision. And all I could think was, I am not thinking this. Now, years later, I'm reading, studying, poring over Iamblichus, and I come over a little piece. I come upon this little piece that he writes in De Mysteriis. Actually, no, it was in De Anima. It was on the soul, and he's talking about what happens when you purify specifically your etheric vehicle. You increase your epididiotis, your receptivity to the gods when you purify the etheric vehicle. You become able to receive them better and more fully. And the way that you receive them at first is in what he calls the fantastikon, which is the imaginal. And the way that he describes it, give me chills, right? Just recalling it. He says, the mind and attention follow what happens because they are not seized by the divine. That's me saying, I am not thinking this. My mind and attention are following what happens. The next line is from Iamblichus, but the fantastikon, the imagination, is seized by the divine and raised up above what is ordinarily human. I've got the chills just saying that, because now this is somebody writing like 1700 years ago of exactly what we're experiencing today. So yes, absolutely. That's the whole point of me saying that, like, the imaginal is a power of the soul, and things like scrying mirrors, things like, whatever it is, fluid condensers, they're aids to becoming adept with these things.
So you have a couple questions. Someone super chatted a question. Is this all done alone? I mean, I can answer that. I mean, definitely not. It can be done alone, but there's a reason people use scryers and do it in groups. And someone, occultology, thanks for the question. Yeah, when I talk about fluid condensers, I am talking about the same thing that Franz Barden is talking about. And the reason they're called fluid condensers was because they saw it as condensing the astral fluid that would give body to the spirit, so we can interact and experience it. Yeah, and then there's a lot of other questions, of course, but not all on point.
Well, maybe let's get to Eleftheria's
Yeah,
piece
yeah.
because we're at about 9:30
It's
here.
been an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We have to fit 3 of us into the next 30 hour and a half, so we can do it. Mine can be short and sweet. I can keep it tight.
Well, you're a very sweet
So,
man.
oh,
Okay. No. I mean, I think potentially I can keep mine relatively short and sweet as well. So, am I on?
go for it, brother.
Okay. Excellent. So, as Ike said, my topic dovetails nicely into his of scrying, because I'm actually talking about a magical technique from Western ceremonial magic, which involves scrying. There's sort of a ritual setup, and then the central piece is using a scrying crystal, similar to Enochian magic. But in fact, what I'm talking about is the technique in the Ars Paulina, which is one of 5 books in the Lesser Key of Solomon, one of the famous texts of Solomonic magic, known infamously as the book that contains the Goetia. And unfortunately, that's most of the time all that it's known for. But there's so much more stuff in there that's not evil, summoning demons. There's evil spirits in the Goetia, but there's some of the Lesser Key of Solomon deals with mixed good and evil, or good spirits, and so we're focusing on the good today. So people asked me in the previous SYNAXIS about my editions of the Greater and Lesser Key of Solomon, what translations that I refer to, which is part of my motivation for looking into this more deeply, because I feel like I didn't answer it as well as I could have, because it's been a few years since I've looked seriously at this stuff. Most of my practice these days, spiritual practices to do with the work on oneself. So sort of my grimoires are gathering dust, but I did have a look at the translations. The Greater Key of Solomon was the Mathis translation version of that book, the one that I have. And the Lesser Key of Solomon that I'm referring to is this one. It's the Joseph Peterson edit of the Lesser Key of Solomon, and it's based on a number of different manuscripts. It's too much detail for me to go into now, but that's the volume that I'm using. And so let's get straight into it. There's a couple of things that I'll note about that as we go on, but so just where was I? Okay, so we're talking about the Lesser Key of Solomon, the different parts of it, and then the Ars Paulina is the 3rd book of the Lesser Key of Solomon. And there's 2 parts of the Ars Paulina, or the Art Pauline of King Solomon, as it's also called. And so the first part is about contacting angels of the hours of the day and night, and there's different talismans for doing that. And then the second part is about establishing contact with one's natal angel, or at least one of the natal angels that you can find. Agrippa gives a different technique for finding a natal angel to what's in the Ars Paulina. But the second operation, contacting one's natal angel, is what I'm going to be talking about. So there's this idea, in Western ceremonial magic, through people such as Agrippa, that we have a personal angel, a personal daemon, if you will, who's represents our higher spiritual genius in some way that we can contact and get information from for our spiritual development. And astrology is one method for finding that daemon, because the stars represent the heavenly influences, and the different placements of our chart represent the specific influences on our life. That's basically the theory behind it. And so I want to make a note about this quickly, because this sounds similar to the idea of the holy guardian angel, but I want to actually argue that it's not. And one feature of this particular version of the Lesser Key of Solomon is that in the conjuration that I'll be going through. It describes it as the conjuration of the holy guardian angel. But actually, different manuscripts simply call it the prayer. So I'm not exactly sure where that comes from. I've got to do a bit of a deep dive into how that got associated with the holy guardian angel. But I think that this is a different idea to the holy guardian angel. The holy guardian angel, as we understand it from the Book of Abramelin, for example, is much more above astrological influences. It's a much more pure heavenly kind of daemon, if you will. Whereas this is to do with the starry influences. It's not quite as lofty. And actually, the Ars Paulina itself talks about the different types of daemon that we have and the different levels of daemon. And so if we go to the second part, it goes through the three types. Bear with me. Okay, so I'll read directly from the Ars Paulina. The ancient philosophers have taught how a man may know the nature of a genius, whether good or bad, from the influx and aspects of the stars in his geniture. So that's the particular type of spirit we're dealing with here. But it goes on to say, a threefold daemon attends every man. One is his proper keeper. One indeed is holy. The other belongs to his geniture or nativity. The holy daemon proceeds not from the stars, but from a supreme power, even from God, who himself is the president of the daemons, and descends to the rational soul being assigned thereto, and is universal above nature's conception. Daemon here, of course, as the rest of the people on this podcast would know, or this stream simply means a spirit. It doesn't mean a demon. So that's what's being referred to here as well. But the daemon of the birth or geniture, which is also called the genius, this genius doth descend to the birth from the disposition of the stars, their circuits around the world, who are conversant in the generation. And then there's a daemon of the profession or calling of the native. So there's at least three distinct daemons. And so it's interesting, perhaps there's a question of semantics here, because the natal daemon is described as the genius in this text, and elsewhere the holy guardian angel can be described as the genius. So perhaps there's some terms that get used interchangeably that creates confusion. But I would argue that, yeah, especially since here it says that the holy daemon is above the natal chart, that what we understand from other texts as the holy guardian angel is not what's being dealt with here. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that point. Now, how do we calculate our natal angel according to Ars Paulina? How do we get to work? So the natal angel is calculated according to one's rising sign. So there's two methods for doing this. The first, if you know your specific natal chart to the degree, then you calculate it by the specific degree that rising that you have on your chart. And in my demonstration, I'm going to be using the example of somebody who has a rising sign that is where the ascendant is 14 degrees Taurus. If you don't have that, if you just know your rising sign and nothing else, then you can choose one of 12 angels based on the rising sign alone. But if you do know your specific degree, there's a whole bunch of nifty tables in the Ars Paulina with different angelic names. And so what you do is you find the sign. So, for example, Taurus, and then you find the degree. And then, so 14 degrees Taurus is Varbiel in this case. And what's interesting about this table is that a lot of the names are repeated. So straight off the bat, you can see Varbiel is both 14 degrees Taurus and Gemini, and then Ariel is 12 degrees Cancer and Leo. So it's kind of interesting how it does that. But anyway, so that's how you get the name of your natal angel. Very simple compared to something like Agrippa's method. So once you've got that, and really the main bit of information that you have is your rising sign. And once you have that, the book will allocate you a talisman based on each of the 12 rising signs. So then there's a talisman for you to construct. So for Taurus, this one, front and back, to use to contact your angel. And the way that the talisman is constructed is quite interesting. It's made by mixing different combinations of metals. And I mean, if you're serious about metallurgy, maybe this is something that you can achieve, but it's quite involved. So for example, here for Taurus, you've got gold. Sorry, that's the footnote. Here we go. Yeah, so it's got the planetary symbol for each metal. So you need to know that gold is the sun, silver is the moon, and so forth. And then it gives you measurements for how much an ounce, a dram. Very medieval, very involved. And if you're not great with that and you're not much of a metallurgist, what I ended up doing was just mixing different colored paints, metallic paints, to get the mixture, and then applying that to a piece of card or wood to create the talisman. So it's a bit of you might say it's a bit of a thrift shop version. But if you want to go the whole 9 yards, get your smelter out, I suppose. But then, so you got the talisman, and then you're also going to get an element for your angel. So based on the rising sign, and the element of the sign will determine the element of the angel. So obviously, your fire signs, Aries, Leo, for example, are going to be fire element. And then different elements will have different strengths. The angel will have different strengths based on his element. So the types of information that you might want to ask a particular natal angel will be determined by its element, whether it's a better place to do that or not. And then each element is also attributed a direction, which gives the angel a direction. But the attribution of the directions to elements is different to what's in the Golden Dawn, either in terms of the 4 cherubs at the macrocosmic level or the microcosmic elements. The directions are fire in the south, earth in the west, air in the east, and water in the north. So basically, you get your direction to know which direction to face when you're invoking the angel. And then the timing for invoking the angel will be when the sun enters the relevant zodiac sign, when the sun enters the rising sign that you're born in. So that's all of the preliminary stuff. And in terms of preparation for the scrying, Ike has discussed that already. So that works well with what I'm talking about here. And I'll just show you the talisman that I prepared when I did this like 10 years ago or something. It looks like this. That's the one that I prepared. So that's the sort of thing. Presumably, what you need to do with the talisman is put it on a table of practice. It doesn't actually say that in part 2 of the Ars Paulina, but in part 1 of the Ars Paulina, it says to put the talismans you create there on the table of practice. So that's going into the magical container that Ike was talking about. In terms of the actual ritual tools, you need a table that has this design on it of the table of practice, and then a white linen cloth over that, and then the crystal ball on top of that. And when I did this, I made a kind of placemat of sorts to serve as the table of practice. That's how it looks. But I've golden dawnified it a bit by adding the different colors of the planets. And you can see this is something that is very Judeo-Christian influenced. Actually, that's upside down. That's the way it should be. Sorry. Saturn at the top. Yes. Let's check that. So anyway, this is something that I just rested on the table. Yep, Saturn at the top. And you can see that there's a clear Jewish, especially, influence. And I mean, the obvious thing is the Star of David, but also this design looks a lot like a Seder table that you would have at Passover, which is something I only realized very recently. And so, you know, the scrying crystal will be mounted on top of that in the center of your table of practice. So you set all of that up, and then you've got to do some exorcisms, so-called, which are really just an invocation, as well as prayers. So what the Ars Paulina says is that you need, bear with me, you need to come up with your own prayers at the beginning, and then you need to do an invocation known as an exorcism, which is to call the genius into the crystal. And this is to be repeated several times until the genius finally does appear in the crystal. And so what this prayer or exorcism is as follows. So using again the example of Varbiel, O thou great and blessed Varbiel, my angel guardian, vouchsafe to descend from thy holy mansion, which is celestial, with thy holy influence and presence, into this crystal stone, that I may behold thy glory, and enjoy thy society, aid and assistance, both now and forever hereafter. O thou who art higher than the fourth heaven, and knoweth the secrets of Elenel, thou that rideth upon the wings of ye winds, and art mighty and potent in thy celestial and superlunary motion, do thou descend and be present, I pray thee, and I humbly desire and entreat thee, that if ever I have merited thy society, or if any of my actions and intentions be real and pure and sanctified, before thee bring thy external presence hither, and converse with me, one of thy submissive pupils, by and in ye name of the great God Jehovah, whereunto the whole choir of heaven singeth continually, O Mapa Laman, Alleluia, Amen. And you read that out as many times as you need to before the angel appears in the scrying crystal. And that's it. That is the operation of the Ars Paulina. I might just quickly touch on my personal experience with this. So I have done this many years ago just to see what would happen, and it's not as impressive as, say, contacting something like the Holy Guardian Angel, but there was a lot of quite good information that came through. When I first started it, I actually could make out an image in the scrying crystal of like a little green angel, like a miniature person holding a key up. It almost looked like a little green fairy. But then that was the most impressive thing that happened in this crystal itself. I kind of more went within after that and sort of went into the zone, so to speak, and just paid attention to the words that came. And this one was a particularly personal message, so I won't share this particular scrying session. But what I will say is that the angel provided a lot of Kabbalistic keys. So what I mean by that is that there were little words that it gave that were significant, not just in terms of their meaning, but when you look into it, actually, the gematria value of that word, for example. and then it all starts to form a pattern in terms of the symbols that are coming through and the themes that are coming through. And in particular, one quite impressive thing that it showed me was it was giving me a phrase, and it said, "And be exalted in your power," and it was drawing my attention to this last term, "be exalted in your power," which actually is a paraphrase of an Enochian term, "in power exalted." And see, this is where it helps. This is where all of the preparation helps in terms of learning correspondences and learning different magical symbols that the spirit can draw upon when it's giving you messages and communicate in a common language. And so I looked into this word, "in power exalted," which in Enochian is launch. And if you apply, I mean, Enochian's not designed for a gematria according to a lot of people, but if you apply Greek gematria to it, it actually comes out as 358, which is the same as the word Mashiach in Hebrew, or Messiah, and also the word Nachash, meaning serpent. So that was quite an interesting connection and correspondence between concepts that I'd never known before, and I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the angels. So that's an example of the kinds of things that can happen when you scry. Clearly, and when something like that happens, it's one method of proving that it's not something that comes just from you, because how can you know that those things are connected? So yeah, so it gave me a little riddle, and then so that's an example of scrying, and that's the technique that is used in the Ars Paulina to contact one's natal angel. And that's pretty much everything that I had to talk about on that. I can take questions or comments from the audience now. Thanks for listening.
All right, so
that was awesome.
That was fantastic. It's fantastic. Anybody that has any questions, just put them in the chat or super chat or whatever.
I've got a question. Meanwhile, if you don't mind,
there was a few questions for Eleftheria. I'll look through them while Sky goes.
I just noticed in terms of the elemental orientation in regards to the directions, the northeast, south, and west. What I'm used to is it'd be like air in the east, fire in the south, water in the west, and then earth in the north. Is that like a pretty strict orientation for this particular method, or is there anything you could speak to in regards to that?
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear that that it attributes each element to a cardinal point, which is different to either of the Golden Dawn methods. But it only really comes into it when you're facing a direction to contact the angel. So yeah, make of that what you will. But
wasn't it the zodiacal alignments, the elemental alignments you laid out for the Ars Paulina, right? Water in the north, fire in the south, Aries in the south or east. Sorry, I thought you when I was listening to you talk, it sounded like the LRH zodiacal alignments, but maybe I misheard you.
It's fire in the south, earth in the west.
Okay, yeah. So
in the east, and water in the north.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's very strange that they've chosen those, but anyway.
Well, I always like to think in terms of, the elements they're all everywhere, right? And we see this in the traditional Enochian tablets, right? And so I often look at it when I'm scrying, and this applies to a lot of things. I often look at it as, what Scott Michael Stenwick would call tuning the space. I like to think of it as sort of setting the parameters, almost like, because, I'm always relying on my nous, my higher consciousness, my holy daimon to guide me through communicating and knowing and learning from spirits and spirit and God. So I like to think of it as me giving parameters in the earthly realm in Malchut for that communication, because otherwise you never know where, higher consciousnesses will guide you. They don't really think like us, and they don't necessarily have our concerns. And that goes back to even the content of scrying. And there's so many threads I wanted to pull on today with what you guys have said so far. There's nowhere near, we'd have to go become 10-hour a day streamers to talk about all the threads I want to pull that you guys have touched on. But one of them in particular is, the diary writing and the recording of these things, often these communications within parameters, whether they stay within the parameters or break the parameters. That's one of the reasons for parameters to see when they're broken, which brings in the whole testing spirits. Someone, a friend in the chat, Cultology, said that the spirits never fail his test. I don't know what to think about that. I would be concerned about that, but we don't have time to get into it. Yeah, we don't really have time to get into it, but we can definitely talk about it in the future. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end. But when they break those parameters, it's interesting. And then recording it down. Every time I sit down and go through my old diaries, especially my training diaries from the 90s, but also my early adept diaries from the 2000s. It's crazy how many things I see there where I'm like, yeah, this doesn't mean anything to me now, but that's what it was. And then I look at it, I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe that this was staring me in the face way back when. The first time as an adept, before I shut down Temple Tahuti, me and my protege, we both set up our big our orders in Nokian table. We had a holy table for the order that happened to be sent to us in Vancouver for, I don't know, I think it was political reasons, honestly, unfortunately, that it was sent up to us to piss off another temple. We the first and only time we did a big Enochian operation and summoned Ave, and we looked really deep, farther into our lives to see what would happen. And there was a lot of grim stuff, but we wrote it down, and it was painful to look back. It's always painful to look back on that entry and to see how much of it actually came true, even the stuff that I thought was silly. A lot of it didn't play out exactly as you'd think, but you can see the influences that could have played out if you had made different choices. It's just such an important aspect of the process of parameters anyway, I'm rambling now. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I wanted to say too about the elemental distribution is actually that corresponds to the macrocosmic elemental disposition of the neophyte temple of the Golden Dawn, right? Water's not in the west. In the macrocosmic elements, water's in the north with the Stolastes. And then you've got fire in the south with the Daluchos. You've got the Hierophant in the east with the air. And you've got the Hyraeus who stands in the black of Malkuth, earth of earth. And that has to do actually with we circumambulate, particularly when we open the temple as well, and we want to rise the light. And where do we start? We start from the northeast. Why? Because on a chart, on an astrological chart, that's technically just below the ascendant. And so as we circumambulate, the sun is rising. And now to correspond that to sort of like a cosmogonical cycle, those are the waters of creation. That's why water is in the north in the macrocosmic disposition of a Golden Dawn temple, because you're always beginning in the waters of creation, right? And as Iamblichus said, all true theurgy is a recreation or a reenactment of the cosmogony, the cosmogenesis. So I work with both of those strictly on a Golden Dawn basis too, but both of those, the kind of water and earth swapped, and then you have the microcosmic elements, which are on the altar, right? And that's okay. Water's in the west, earth's in the north.
Well, that's really interesting. So then that's pointing us, appropriately enough towards a elemental but macrocosmic kind of framework that we're working within. That the same level as the signs of the zodiac, at least. So that's that's very appropriate, actually.
Well, that was That was a fantastic presentation. I love your delivery, man. Just in general, you gotta really. It's just pleasant to listen to you. But
Thank you.
well, because you enunciate and you're clear and you're concise and your pacing is just easy to absorb. So very good teaching style. We're at about 10 o'clock, which is good actually for me. I feel like we're making time. I'm here to hang to the end. And then I'm gonna go have like a half-hour pipe in my sunroom before I go to bed, smelling like a chimney stack. So RC, did you say that you would prefer to go last, or should we go to Sky next? Who wants to
Yeah,
contribute
let me
here?
go last because mine touches on what Sky is doing, and yeah, and I'm he's got some images and stuff prepared, whereas I can condense mine pretty well.
Sky, are
if
you
don't
ready?
mind, Sky. He's
Let's
done
do it.
so little talking tonight. He's just there for eye candy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like the Justin Timberlake in terms of like like this group we got going on.
Thank you. All right. So let's see. I figured I would just kind of lend some quick insight into a couple things. First one, pretty simple, but I just wanted to briefly throw this in there. Just the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And I can just speak to my experience because I've always had pretty intense dream life. And so most of us probably occasionally have bad dreams or nightmares. And so, just one thing that I've observed after consistently practicing the LBRP is that if I'm having a bad dream and there's like a negative psychic force or entity or something like that, I'll almost instinctively perform the LBRP as a sort of defense, and it 100% just works for kind of like empowering myself and clearing the field. And often it then produces lucidity. Um, so yeah, for me, I think it's something maybe to do with the function of like really centering the consciousness with all four directions, vertically kind of bringing down the light and establishing that equilibrium and presence. So that's kind of just my thoughts on that. But I thought that I would speak to out of body experiences and projection because I have some experience in this as well. Um, so the first time I had an OBE, I think I was like 18. I was out working in the sun for hours and physically exhausted and went inside. I think I was like all sweaty and dirty or something. So instead of laying on the bed, I just laid on the floor and on my back. And I don't remember if it was like immediate or what, but pretty soon I just woke up a couple of feet above my body and I realized, like, whoa, like I was kind of shocked by it. And once I realized it, I just like fell back into my body. Um, but yeah, I was kind of just like blown away by this because I had heard people talk about like out of body experiences when I was younger, but I didn't really know how to wrap my mind around it. So anyway, I became kind of like obsessively curious about this phenomena and I wanted to have it happen again. And pretty soon after, I stumbled upon uh, this really good book. I'll pull it up right here. Um, yeah, I just found it at a used bookstore or something. And it's called Projection of the Astral Body by Sylvain Muldoon and Hereward Carrington. And in that, I found kind of the phenomenology and methods for what they refer to as astral projection. So in it, kind of describes firsthand reports and different patterns and theory of like the mechanics of separation. So I read some of this and kind of just got familiar with what to expect, how to be prepared, and so on. And it described, a bunch of things like, many people will be familiar with, such as like this really intense vibrational transition state that occurs prior to exteriorization. So it's kind of like this like really intense buzzing or vibration that can be actually kind of very terrifying at first, and it kind of builds in intensity till it eventually settles, and then you're able to essentially kind of like will yourself up and out of your body. So I obviously tried this a number of times and failed. I, got startled or just too excited, and the state of being excited or scared, it can actually just kind of bring you right back to the physical body. So the trick is, as hard as it is to just kind of embrace it and just kind of trust and let it do its thing and carry out this vibrational state. Trying to remain alert or aware. Because like if you fight it, you kind of like struggle against it, you'll often kind of get locked back into this uncomfortable like sleep paralysis state, at least for me. And that's what a lot of people report. But yeah, so I've had, many times attempting to do these things, and I'm by no means proficient at it, but I would say like the key for me has also been not trying to force control and kind of recognizing that it's not like a physical muscular control you're working with. And when you get uh like a like if you like we start to feel like the sensation a few times, you'll be able to eventually kind of like float up and out of your body. And it's just like so foreign that your tendency by default will be to kind of think of your body, but focusing your attention on your body will bring you right back into your body. So don't do that. So I eventually had like this really mind blowing, successful, intentional out of body experience where I rose up out of my body. I looked down at my form, and it was kind of like a translucent, glowing light form that generally was in kind of like the outline or shape of my actual body. I could see behind me like a lingering cord connected to my body, which in the literature is referred to as a silver cord or an astral cord. So I went through, like willed myself forward through the house walls. I was outside, I went into the front yard area, and I was just kind of observing for a while. And I looked up at the moon. I could hear the actual sounds outside. I looked at like the dirt and the details of the ground and observed all the surroundings in the yard. And looking up the streets, everything was pretty illuminated by the moonlight. So unintentionally, it was a pretty moonlit night, and everything was exactly the same as it was literally outside in the real physical world, but in more of a but I was more like in my like subtle body, I guess. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, where do I want to go? I feel like I can just travel or go anywhere if I just focus my attention on it. So I stood there, and all of these faces started flashing in front of me as I just like thought about this. Just all of these faces just and it just started accelerating like rapidly. And then I was just like transported to the side of a road in broad daylight at like some campsite overlooking the ocean. Like it could have been like Hawaii or Costa Rica or something. So I was just looking around and observing the people, just doing their regular things. There was parked cars and tents set up, and I looked over at this couple, and they're kind of like hippie vibe. They were like making food, and they had like lounge chairs, and they were under a canopy. And I was just like staring at the guy, and I wasn't sure if he'd be able to see me or what. And he did. And we just like stared at each other for like a minute. And we were just like both just like smiling out of fascination. And he looked like he was stoned or something. But yeah. And so then I just, I started kind of pulling back, like moving backwards through the air, and the scene kind of dissipated and started to get darker. And I didn't have any control anymore. It was just like being magnetically pulled, and eventually made my way back into my physical body. So then over the years, like kind of here and there, I've had all kinds of similar experiences, but none quite like that, with the realism and the vividness of it all. And so like my overall sense is that most of the time the phenomena that's usually described as astral projection is a bit different than what I'm describing here. I think that I would refer to this as more of an etheric projection, because it seems like it's actually the etheric body that's being utilized. Because I've also had many astral projection experiences, but the differences are that, at least in my experience, I tend to notice the environment is actually altered or different, and different than like the actual real world environment. Or often I'll just be like traveling in outer space, like through an asteroid belt, or just like deep into the earth, or through like abstract symbolic imagery. It's all very vivid and like psychedelic, but not actually resembling the real world reality. So there's that. But aside from that, astral projection, in my experience, still, it always does contain that intense vibrational state that precedes it. And a few other things that I've noticed that are very important are, at least for me, I've noticed hydration and like dietary considerations and breath. Like if I'm dehydrated, I tend to have pretty negative experiences. I get stuck in sleep paralysis. Kind of like I wake up in my body, I'm not able to move or wake up. Um, if I eat too heavily, I can, kind of having like active body digestive activity, it tends to sort of like anchor me in my body more and prevent that separation state from occurring. And another thing I've noticed is if I'm in an astral projection state, there's still often this background awareness of my physical body. I can sense like my surroundings, and I could sense my breathing. And I've definitely noticed that like steady, controlled breathing can extend the duration of the experience. Like every breath kind of acts as like a fuel, or like a vitality that kind of keeps it going, at least for longer than it originally would have. And I've heard people talk about different methods of separating from their body, where they will like try to roll out of it to the side. And apparently, most people have more success with that method. Um, I just go straight upwards vertically. That's been the way that I've had good experience. And yeah, I think it all has a lot to do with the nervous system, the physical nervous system, and finding and kind of cultivating a relaxed equilibrium within the nervous system. Because I think that the nervous system of our physical body is kind of linked to the etheric, and then the etheric is probably linked to the astral, and it has these like subtle levels of um yeah. So I've had some wild lucid experiences with alcohol, but I've tended to like I don't think that I think that tends to hinder things. Like I've had some really exhausting experiences where I've attracted negative entities that are not so fun. I've had to like battle like these dark forms. And so I generally, I think alcohol diminishes the vitality of whatever allows for that autonomy of movement or will, maybe. And I would say that overstimulating the nervous system with things like caffeine can definitely hinder things. Nicotine, though, I personally have actually found to be very complimentary for kind of putting me in that relaxed yet aware state, but that might vary from person to person. And I'd say that you should probably practice with not becoming dependent on any substances to assist you, if you really want to develop the skill effectively. And then obviously just, having like a quiet, comfortable environment. I think if you're going to be practicing it with any sincerity, you want to have like a reliable, disciplined, like sleep schedule, and which has always been personally kind of my biggest challenge, just the lack of discipline and consistency and sleep schedule and diet and all that stuff and stimulants. Or smoking weed definitely personally hinders things for me in regards to relaxation and sleep or dream or astral work. But yeah, so I think that that's like a little bit of my thoughts. I still have a lot of questions with all of that stuff, but um because I'm not able to just do it with any proficiency or reliable consistency. Um, but probably due to just like the lack of discipline with those things that I mentioned. But hopefully, maybe this offers some inspiration. I know that a lot of people struggle with sleep paralysis, and I've heard a lot of people talk about sleep paralysis and the struggles that they have, and describing all sorts of terrible things. And for me, this has like been the way out. And so yeah, I think that you'll find that these subjects, like when you read about them, they're spoken about in different ways by different authors, and usually using terminology of astral projection. But I think I would personally distinguish one as more of etheric projection versus the other as astral projection. And so this book that I mentioned by Muldoon and Carrington here, it really helped me. But of course, I think Steiner has some good stuff, but he can be like a little heady. And Dion Fortune, of course. And actually, after being inspired by Egg here, I read a work by Dion Fortune called The Secrets of Dr. Taverner, which is phenomenal. And it has a great story in there about what I would call like etheric projection. And yeah, it's her fiction, and Dion Fortune's fiction is pretty much based on truth, just kind of encoded in fiction. And Dr. Taverner in there is the fictionalized character of the real life Theodore Moriarty, I think his name was, who was like a Irish theosophical occult metaphysician and Dion Fortune's first magical mentor. And so there's like really little documentation of him, but you can kind of get a sense of him by reading that book. So I highly recommend that for anybody that's interested in any of this stuff. I guess he led like an occult lodge in London in like the early 1900s. And in the book, he's like an occult healer who investigates psychic disturbances, diagnoses stuff like wandering souls and magical attacks, like etheric vampirism. It's fucking awesome. So if you're into any of that stuff, but yeah, that's just kind of like my little tidbit and my contribution here. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, dude. I mean, great presentation. There's certainly a lot of stuff there. Again, I think one of the main things that's I'm glad that somebody asked why in the presentation I gave, somebody asked why I put astral in quotations, because this again is the source of trouble in terms of the semantics, the usage of the term. When you're talking about the astral body, you're not talking about the astral realm anymore. It's again, they're using the older version of that, right? The astral body was the luminous body. So you're actually onto something there. And the way that, and I've talked about this with you before, the way that I kind of conceive of it is, especially because of the way that it's taught in the Golden Dawn, there's astral projection and there's astral travel. And these, I have my own way of defining those. Some people use them synonymously, but I think again, the point that you made about let's say analogical. It's just an analogy, but it serves a purpose. You've got the dense body here, and you've got the astral or the imaginal here, and you got the etheric that links the two to each other. So really, the movement of the physical body will necessitate the movement of the etheric, right? Because it's like your aura and your inner aura and all that stuff. But then also the movement of your imagination will somehow it pulls in. It has that direct linkage to the etheric. So I think that you're definitely onto something there. In the Golden Dawn, we use the imagination to project outside of us an etheric mass, and then through these like tubes that are called rays in the document, the order documents, you transfer your consciousness into that vehicle. You can do that in terms of like a place as well, using those like etheric tubes, these rays to fire your consciousness. But it's I think one of the best things about the whole presentation is bringing the light to this idea that there's a difference between astral projection and etheric projection, and it's all there in the language. So what you really got to do is like try it for yourself and then come to your own definitions.
Definitely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And thank you, Sky, for that presentation. And what you were describing in terms of the difference between the astral and the etheric, definitely resonates. And if you have something like rising through the planes, for example, that tends to be much more like an astral experience, like the Doctor Strange type psychedelic realms, versus the much more earth-like, which in theosophy would be described as etheric. So that was and just want to kind of add to what other people have said about how important that difference is. I had some questions for you based on your experimentations with this. The first one, you kind of answered it already, the first one, but have you ever encountered like somebody who shows up during a projection who seems to be like monitoring you, like a dark or humanoid kind of entity that's like almost like a surveillance type thing? And then also, have you had experiences with time anomalies, like you try and go somewhere in the etheric and you actually find that you're a few hours in the past or the future? So I'll just throw to you on those.
So I've definitely noticed, at least in that experience, the original experience that I described when I was first, out in the yard, like some sort of light, maybe somebody else traveling or something off in the distance, like just going by, but nothing that was interfering with me. And what was the second question you asked?
Time anomalies, like if you try and go to a specific place, have you found that you go to the place you're trying to get to, but it's like a few hours earlier or later?
I personally usually like I've tried to go to familiar places, like the house that I grew up in, but and this is in an astral projection experience, and everything in the scene was just complete, like the yard was different. There was like it was completely like different things were there, and I don't know, I didn't have any kind of sense of whether it was a past or future, or if it was reflective of a real time. So that was, that's kind of interesting. But like most of the experience I have had, I think you asked about interference with some entities or people or something like that. I had this pretty wild experience where it started off like a lucid dream, and I was I noticed a man that was suspicious or something, and I was kind of weary of him. And uh, he eventually, what happened is he kind of like climbed on my back, and like my perception was he like stabbed me in the back or something. And then I had this very like physical, like, whoa, like intense sensation, but then that projected me into like an astral projection. And then I was just like, I just went, it was just like I went down into the earth, and I was just like, like viewing like all these different metallic, like abstract things, and like down into like the bottom of a pit, and there was like this really clear puddle that underneath it was like seashells and rocks, and like it was just, I just kept, and I was just going, and I didn't really have the, what was presented to me. I was just like going and seeing what happened and being open to it, and I just kind of like went with it, and I was like, whatever presents itself, just present it. And then so that was just kind of like a really abstract, cool, beautiful thing, but nothing like very meaningful, I guess. And um
Yeah, it almost
but
sounds shamanic, like something you read in Carlos Castaneda, like that
yeah,
the master kind of pushes you out of your body. Yeah, cool.
yeah. And then I've had, I've gone, and I've thought that I was out and I was in my actual environment, and then started to notice, oh, this is kind of different. Things are different. I'll just go and float up into space or something. And then, floating above my landscape and just observing, and more exploratory stuff, but never like really had too much success being able to intentionally will or go to somewhere specific or do something with like really good success. So yeah.
I love that there's a new book for me to read that you find useful. I always like getting qualified recommendations of astral travel books, because I mean, there was a book out in the 90s. I don't know if either any of you guys caught it, but I drove like 2 hours out of town to the only bookstore that carried it just to get a copy, and it was the next level. It was teleportation. And it was basically, they were basically
Oh,
describing astral travel stuff. I know I would like to actually look that book up and see if you can still find a copy on Abe or something like that. But basically, they're trying to get you to do a snap travel, astral travel to a different place, but they're like, oh, but you're really, really there. And it's like, well, that does sound like etheric projection. I always heard of it described as mental projection, astral projection, and etheric projection. This is the three categories that I was commonly referred to in the 90s. And, mental projection is the practicing point where you're going through it mentally to go through the motions, but you can still achieve some, like, they blend, I think, into one another. But telling people to start with it just mentally, not worrying about a full emotional extraction from their body. You're not trying to get fully out, you're just getting your mind capable of moving around conceptually. um and then eventually your astral fluid, your emotional and body, your astral body gets pulled out with that, I think, is the idea. I didn't have to go through those steps to learn astral travel, so that wasn't useful to me. And then, but the third idea, the final one stage, of course, is etheric projection, often defined as you're really there. You're not seeing just your version of a room that you're in, but you could actually put a tarot card in another room, have someone etheric travel to it, and find out veritably what it is. So these things, I think, tend to blur into one another, but I do think they are real and worth their own sort of recognition in their own terms. I can say that from my own experience, because like one of the earliest shocking experiences I had, and all my early astral travel experiences were shocking. It's sad that that diary is no longer with me, but fortunately, in 2007, I wrote a couple hundred pages of my first attempt at an autobiography and transcribed all those entries into it, so I still have them. Thank God. Yeah, and I'll share them. So we could do a whole session sometime on astral stuff. Go astral junkie, go full astral junkie.
That'd
for a
be
full
awesome.
session.
That'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And then we can go into some real, pull out our diaries and shit. Maybe look at some experiences that we forgot we even had. But here's one early experience. So one of the first experiences in my main book that helped me succeed finally was Gavin and Yvonne Frost's book, Astral Travel. And I think they took a lot from the Gateway stuff. They also took a lot from Theosophy. They talk about the here now, so versus the higher planes or the astral planes. So the etheric replica of our physical world. They talk about sex in the astral plane too. That was fun. Probably
I have
helped
a
me.
story about that we could
Yeah.
talk about eventually.
Well, you just like go merge with the spirit, just like, do the, and it works. Holy shit, does it work? It's probably the reason I didn't even feel the slightest twinge at not having a girlfriend in grade 9 or 10 or whatever. But I had one early astral travel experience. I decided to leave the higher plane I was in, and I shot down to my school, or I was pulled to my school. I can't remember what it was. I might have been pulled there. I have to look at that entry again. But I was pulled to my Waldorf school into the grade 9 classroom. And then all of a sudden through the wall walked one of my classmates, a girl I'd known since kindergarten. And I saw her there, and I was like, "What are you doing there?" And she's like, "I don't know. What are you doing here?" And I'm like, I don't remember what I said, but that was the experience. And then, then it faded or something. I can't remember the details. But the next day at school, she came to me and she turned around from her desk and said, "I had a dream about you last night and we were here in the school." And I was like, that's one of those moments where you're like, what the fuck? I'm going to be stuck doing this shit for the rest of my life. How can you walk away from this? And, you're just, I doubled down on my diet of like, not having carbonated beverages because my psychic told me that would help, and all these things. I just, it's experience moments like that where you go, this is even beyond anything I think I'll ever be able to humanly conceive of what's really happening. And at the time that was a minor experience given the other experiences we're having. Me and my best friend kept trying to astral travel to each other's bedrooms at night and enter each other's body and control it to go to the desk and write something on a piece of paper. We could never do that though.
That sounds mildly erotic.
It was kind of fucked up. It was kind of dangerous actually, because when you did lie into the person's, you waited till you saw their astral body leave, at least in your mental astral scape you did, and then you try and lay down into their body and move it. And we'd see if the other person had any experiences the next day, and we never got too far with that. But it also was very weird, so we stopped doing it pretty quickly because it just felt a bit off. It felt a bit odd.
Yeah.
But it's worth sharing that those experiments can be done.
I like being in the body. One of the book I started with was I got it here somewhere. Ophiel's Art and Practice of Astral Projection. I still like Ophiel's. I think that he probably writes some of the best. He's long dead now, but these books came out in like the 60s, 70s, maybe the 80s. Yeah. They're very good for beginners. He doesn't give you like a jot of context. It's very clear that he knows what he's doing, and he learned it from the Golden Dawn theosophical kind of vein. But he doesn't give you any of that. He gives you practice. He tells you what to do. And the way that I started out was actually doing like memory palace sort of work, where I'm not necessarily remembering, and Freemasons will be familiar with this, but it's part of the classical ars memoria, where you envision if you're a nobleman or a Roman senator or an emperor, you envision your palace and you walk the halls to each room. So I was envisioning, at the time I was at my mother's house and on Long Island, and he said, okay, don't look at yourself, don't look back, but imagine yourself getting up and walking around the room and then go down the hall. And then come back. Don't go too far, but try and pick up as many details as you can, the texture of the wall, so on and so forth. And then each time you practiced every day, you'd go a little further and come back and a little further. And that would eventually prepare you for a full exit, which was really good because I don't like those experiences. I will do them, but I don't like to have them. If even it feels fun for a minute, it's almost like that feeling of flying that you get when you're in a lucid dream. But I personally, I just don't like it. There's something. I'm very Taurian in nature. I'm hyper connected to my body, hyper aware of my body and even my energetic body. But I did have one time where I went completely spontaneously out, and it was and GD people will know it was my first time in the Pastas, and I literally, it felt like I sat up, except it's closed. I'm in a coffin, and I turned and looked and saw myself, and I was almost nose to nose, and I started to panic, and I remember thinking, "Holy shit, how do I get back in?" It was like really weird, really, really weird. And in the, and like people that most of you people would know are like in the vault around me, literally just chanting and doing like this weird it's like almost like when people do the wave in like a football stadium, they were doing that with their voices, which was very interesting with the vibration. So, but that was the only time that's never happened. And it just was one of those things where I just willed myself to kind of like come back. That was very quick, but yeah, I don't really like that. Do you guys have any feelings of discomfort when you go out intentionally out of body?
It depends on the intensity of the experience for me. Yeah, I mean, I've had my lucid dreaming experiences have been a bit different to my other kind of intentional astral travel experiences. When I lucid dream, that feels like I'm really untethered, like I'm floating out of my body, and it's kind of quite noticeable. Whereas like when I've done, well, what Sky would call etheric body projection experiments, it feels like I'm kind of still aware of my physical body as well as this other thing, which is a bit weird. Almost like when you're playing a video game, you're aware of your physical body, maybe less aware, but then there's also this avatar that you're controlling as well. At least that's been my experience. I don't know about other people. But yeah.
Yeah, I would say like the most terrifying or like hard to deal with aspect for me is the initial transition state. There's sometimes it's like you think you hear like all these voices or sounds that are like really intense, and you swear that you're hearing people talking, and it kind of just throws your consciousness off. And or sometimes you have that feeling that there's like an entity there that's like a like, like a negative force and I don't know if it's always just a mental thing, or like a fear thing, and like my attention is helping conjure this sort of thing, or if it's something else, but it can become like a really scary thing, and then I'm like, I don't want to, and then I just get out of there or whatever. But that's kind of my take. But once I'm out of body, or once I get past all that, I don't ever have any like I haven't as of yet had any um uncomfort or to me it's amazing.
I think this is Richard, but he's asking any connection between astral projection / travel and alchemy. What do you guys think?
Well,
Travel and alchemy. You go on.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you consider things like rising in the plains to be a form of astral projection, which I think it's fair to say it kind of is, but it's very theurgic, right? So that would have to do with spiritual alchemy for sure, and theurgy and transformation. But alchemy is such a ambiguous term in our world. It sort of, does it have to do with alchemy? I think definitely it has to do with like the balancing of the elements of your body, the balancing of mercury, sulfur, and salt. We've been talking nonstop about equilibrium. Here's an alchemical thing with entheogens. Someone asked, what about the effects of the devil's lettuce on all of this? Well, I've only tried that once, and I was during a Enochian ether working with Lon Milo in Vancouver. Shout out Lon, we love you. And the guys outside invited me to partake with them, and I was like, I've never done this before, so let's do it as an experiment. I saw it as an entheogenic experiment, and so I joined Chris Bennett, the psychedelic author of great fame. Shout out Liber 420. If you don't have Liber 420, that book is phenomenal. It's a history. It goes through Freemasonry, Knights Templars, Rosicrucianism, and it publishes all the accounts of entheogen use that have never been published before that he found. It's 777 pages long. Great book. And it's a work of journalism more than academia, of course. It's more like, hey guys, why aren't you addressing any of this? Let's talk about it. He doesn't see himself as an academic, but just as sort of a researcher and journalist, and he is a great one at that for the psychedelic realms. So the experience I had with entheogens on doing this work, the shocking difference was it actually just seemed to make it harder because it made it harder for me to focus. It sort of reminded me like what Rudolf Steiner had suggested about alcohol in astral travel, that it weakens the mental body, which makes sense to me because that means that the astral layer of the astral body is being more controlled by your emotional or layer of the aura, if you want to think in these terms. And that makes perfect sense, right? Your mind is less in control of the astral body. It's more running on your emotions, which, as we all know, we don't have much control of if the mind is disconnected from them. So my experience was it made it harder to stay focused during the operation and going through this tunnel. And I was going through tunnels in the aether. And then when I arrived in Tex, I did my operation there, but also a bunch of images like a unicorn and a dragon and shit that never appears to me really in astral vision experiences appeared. And then afterwards, other people in the hall doing the operation said, this is what I saw. And I saw those images, the dragon, the unicorn, these things that were intrusive, they came from the same directions those people were sitting. So my focus was less. So I think I was able to pick up more on what other people were thinking or seeing or imagining. And it made it just harder to focus on the operation. It just limited my focus and concentration. I was like, and it pointed out to me how crucial in these practices often our focus is. It really comes back to what Tomberg says about the first arcanum. The key to the magician is concentration without effort, and I think that really is the key. So the great presentation, Sky.
Yeah, I think also because of the situation of modern life and the fact that we have all these incredible stresses that drive us from meeting to appointment to so on and so forth. We feel like we need a break, like a release, because that's what that stuff is. Alcohol, drug usage, a lot of times it's a form of escapism. Sure. Is there curiosity? Sure. Can there be meaningful events? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's novelty. And one of the ways that it does this is by taking that, sort of conglomeration, this mass of ideas of self and this way of perceiving the world and sort of shifting it. And one of the consequences is that, it pulls apart the holistic nature of everything, the personal ruach, and that is ultimately something that we're trying to do in something like the Golden Dawn, but we're doing it with intentionality, with guardrails, and gradually over time, rather than as a form of kind of like escapism. So I definitely agree with you on that theoretically. Theoretically, I admittedly, because I will never get high or drunk and do any of this stuff. Is that would be a complete desacralization of it for me. It would be a complete profanation of these rights, and I don't need any of that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm kind of like Sky in some of these departments where it's always come easier for me. So maybe I speak from a little bit of a privileged situation, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure that anybody needs to be doing that stuff to participate in ritual. And just for everybody watching this, my beliefs are not. They're my own. They're not necessarily. I do not speak for the other three gentlemen here.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm sure everyone knows that. So did I change my form? Someone asked when I went through the tunnel. Well, when I'm doing these things, I am me. So I'm not imagining myself doing something. I'm not seeing myself from a third party perspective. I am myself. So I'm not seeing my own form. I'm just traveling as a dot of consciousness through whatever I'm going. Now to caveat that, what I'm going to do my short little presentation before we wrap up, there is a time when I do see myself as changing form, and that's what I'll talk about with my little segment now on Tatwas. I think we'll just move into that because we're coming to the end game here, and people were saying earlier Ike looks tired, and Ike is a champion. As much as Eleftheria gets up at 7 a.m. to do this, Ike has to stay up late because he's on the East Coast, whereas me and Sky here, we're sitting pretty. It's only 7:45 p.m. for us on the West Coast. Though BC, Canada, we're not going to have daylight savings anymore, so that's going to be all wonky next year. We'll be out of sync with Seattle, which is ridiculous. Different time zone from a city 2 hours south of you. Crazy.
Don't
Yeah.
don't rush on my account though, because I'm here already. I just had a very late meal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to answer that question thoughtfully because I do appreciate that question. So I don't change form when I go through a tunnel. I'm just me. Usually, I'm just me unless I'm doing something to be slightly different, modifying my astral form, which I'll talk about now. And was there another question there? I missed. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to comment too much on other people's experiences because they're different for all of us, and we're all trying to do different things sometimes, different experiences. I mean, I think it's important to have a plethora of experiences so you can get a sense of common denominators. I don't know. I just don't want to say too much about other people's experiences because everyone's different. And let's talk about Tatwas, which ties into this very interestingly because I'm going to dedicate this segment to the late deceased and great Golden Dawn adept and temple chief George Wilson, who I'm blessed to say became a friend right before the end of his life this past last year. He and his crew in Vancouver came to Enokia Con. I appreciate all of them for coming and supporting what we did, and they had a great time, of course. And I got to meet George Wilson, who is where did I? Here it is. Who is mentioned? He's one of, you notice in this book there's footnotes all throughout it, and there's footnotes with initials at the end, and one of them is George Wilson, and there's even a little section that talks about each of these people. And I won't say too much about his. I won't. He's again out of the Cicero order, and obviously based here, but I won't say more than that out of respect for the privacy of your order and your tradition, you guys. But it was cool. Many of there's old members from Temple Tahuti who are connected with them, and I got to go for Halloween to a Halloween party with, again, invited by a member of your order, and George Wilson came out from where he lives outside of Vancouver and came, I think, largely to hang with me, actually. So that was very flattering. I have some cool photos. I posted some on my Instagram. Go to Hermetic Podcast Instagram, all that jazz. And I just want to dedicate this to him because we talked all night. We had a little a little dram and enjoyed some other puka hats, some magic mushrooms, and taught Golden Dawn color magic for about 7 hours straight, and crashed on sofas like we were in high school. It was pretty cool to get to have that experience with this legend of our tradition. And his son recently, when he passed, posted a photo of him and his wife from when they were in the movie Easy Rider together. So George Wilson was a freaking legend, like hippie actor dude from the days of Easy Rider all the way up to having this amazing magical career, and to, you know, being a major contributor to this book. And so we talked Golden Dawn color magic most of the night. We talked about everything we could possibly think to talk about. But one of the most interesting parts of the conversation was when I asked him if he thought that Mathers and Westcott would still include Tatwas if they were alive today, given how much more we know about the Western mysteries. Would they still include those Eastern mysteries? And he said no, he agreed with me. He thought that no, they probably wouldn't. Then he went further than I would go to say that he never thought that they were that great and weren't that worthwhile having and stuff like that. And just, he wasn't a big fan of Tatwas. That's fine. You know, he felt the way of Tatwas about the way I felt about geomancy for a long time. So you can read about George Wilson in this book. There's a little few sentences about him. I can't find it right now. But George, if you're listening, and I know you are, this little segment's for you, brother. So I gave him my sales pitch on Tatwas. I'm selling Tatwas to a great legend of the Cicero order and of the Golden Dawn tradition. And I told him this is what I told him was my argument why I think, while they might not be included in the tradition today if Mathers and Westcott were around and saw the other options, I do love them, and I do think they present something uniquely powerful to the Golden Dawn tradition. And that's because they are these shapes. Sky has this book, which is great. You can hold that up if you want. Again, Sky, which, you know, so let's talk about the earth. They're the 5 elements: earth, water, air, you know, spirit, akasha in the center. The earth one is an orange square. So what I told George that I liked about Tatwas is that it's the only technique we use in which we're starting with a physiological function of the body. So you stare at this orange square with a white background. Sometimes you have the flashing color in the background, but Westcott pointed out that that's not very ideal. And Westcott also made very clear the dimensions and proportions of the cards and the white background you should have. Yeats didn't follow them, if you've seen Yeats's Tatwas. So, you know, whatever, if you're, depending on how good you focus. Some people make massive ones, and that makes sense if you're, you know, starting out. But either way, you're starting by focusing on this orange square until your eyes get a little bit tired, and then you close your eyes, or you move your eyes to the white wall beside it, and you'll see your retina is automatically flipping the color to a purple, to a violet, because that's how colors work in our eyes. And you're not vibrating any divine names. And we're talking about the Golden Dawn version of this technique, and I'm specifically going to talk about the way I was taught to do them, also influenced by the flying rules, because that's what led me to love them so much and become such a fanatic about them. In our order's curriculum, it was said that it's one of the few techniques most adepts underestimate, and they're to their own detriment. And so as a young magician, I was like, well, then I'll take it all the way and see where it goes. Now, I certainly haven't taken it all the way 30 years later, but I'm working on it still. And I've done a lot with Tatwas, and I love them. So you're flipping this color in your retina. You close your eyes, the yellow becomes purple, and you turn it, you see it expand into a doorway, like with path working or with some scrying techniques. And then you don't even vibrate any divine names. You're not doing anything. You're just allowing this natural color transformation caused by a physiological function of your body, and then you're stepping into it. You're not designating it as anything. You're just letting the colors and the shape purely be what they are. And the idea is that that alone leads you into the realm of earth. Now, once you're there, you vibrate divine names, the Hebrew ones, and then eventually even Enochian ones in the Golden Dawn tradition, to bring the landscape to life. And I see that as setting the parameters. Now, I do have a theory of what I think is going on. And this is because the divine Hebrew names that we use terminate, unlike many iterations of divine litanies, of names, they terminate with the directional names, Darom, Mizrach, right? So the directional names, which makes me theoretically see it as entering the elemental plane of Malkut. Because otherwise, why would there be directional names if you're going beyond Malkut? Why would there be a directional name used? You wouldn't use one. So by using it, you're setting that parameter of I'm staying in Malkut, I'm participating in the astral direction of this realm, of the planet, of the created universe. I'm not going beyond that. I'm staying sort of down here with the fairies and the elves and the gnomes and the salamanders and the undines and the dryads and the naiads and the puka and the cluricon. Yeah, the list of fairies and spirits goes on and on. And I won't torture Ike, though it would be fun to. so you,
I
you
love
then...
it. I just wrote a whole chapter and a book about these little things.
Oh, you did? Well, good. That's great. That's great. So I worked. Yates carried his tatwas around with him in his pocket. He'd be sitting down at a turf fire in Western Ireland with some people. Maybe he knew some, maybe he didn't. He'd pull them out, start, chanting the names, and have them all have a shared vision experience. Like, he used these things very casually, almost flippantly by our modern standards. But, if you're in the west of Ireland pre-electricity days with a turf fire in the middle of the night with a bunch of old Irish people, that's probably enough ritual alone and on its own, back in those days, with this just a pre-modern, pre-industrialized astral plane around you. So I love the fact that you sort of activate the realm once you already go into that. And this was what I said to George. And by the end of my whole spiel, he was sold. He was like, you know what, I take that back. I think they are pretty cool. And I'm glad I convinced him that tatwas were cool before the end of his life. And I hope that I see him in those tatwic planes again someday. There's other aspects to the tatwas, the science of the breath paper, which wasn't something our order actually just excluded it. The one order I was trained in, we just didn't go there. It's like, yeah, you can go into that as an adept if you want, but the whole breathing thing, I get it. I've practiced it. Didn't resonate with me as much as just straight up the technique I just described. But working in tatwas, I have a lot of really interesting diary entries of experiences working with the elements in tatwas and the sub-elements. And I will be actually releasing an experiment for people to do to my YouTube members. I'll probably put it for my patrons on my Hermetic Mystery School website as well. So you can join my YouTube membership page if you want to get this whole hour-long walkthrough technique. It will be pretty cool. And it is a tatwa exercise that goes slightly beyond tatwas, in that it begins with, and this ties into what the questioner was saying earlier, it begins with creating a different version of yourself by stepping into a god form and assuming the form of a god who is a guide, who is a healer, and who is a protector, particularly a protector and a spirit designed to hold back the dog, a god who holds back the dog-faced demons, as we say. And or is one of the spirits, the gods that holds that back. And so I actually even have I made a couple cool little images to demonstrate that. So the technique I will be sharing on my members YouTube involves going into the Tatwa Prithivi in this particular god form. And I used the modern technology that we have to make a cool image representing it, because by names and images are all powers awakened and reawakened. So there you go. You get the idea. I won't share it too long because, it's just too powerful and I don't want to overwhelm anyone. I also have a cool image of him holding back the dog-faced demons, but, yeah. So that's the basics. I've kept it short. Wow, look at that. I did keep it tight. George Wilson, wherever you are in the universe, this one's for you, brother. I love you. Thanks for being a part of my life, even though it was at the end of yours. And I know the magical world owes you a lot for what you kept alive here in the Pacific Northwest and in British Columbia for many years without many people knowing about it. And I hope his work continues. I know his work carries on in all the people whose lives he influenced. And he's a tribute to your order, you guys, who are in the Cicero group. So yeah, I feel very blessed to have gotten to know him a bit. And that's Tatwas. So there's a lot that can be said about Tatwas, of course. And I talk about this stuff on my channel all the time. Ike's just written a chapter about it. If anyone has any thoughts, questions, what do you guys think? What's your read on all of this?
Oh no, not the Tattvas, fairies. Can you believe
fairies?
that?
Oh,
Can you
good.
believe that?
Oh, you're going right up my alley.
I had to write a chapter on fairies, satyrs, all sorts, the elementals. It was great fun. It was great fun. That was you bring up some excellent points, man. I've always found Tattvas to be essential. I use them in independent training with students because early on, exactly what you're saying, it's the best way to train your etheric vision. The vision that eventually, like I teach people, and I wrote about it in the book, how to see the type of it accustoms you to the type of sight and use of your retinas that you will eventually need in order to begin to see auras and begin to see I don't want to say bioluminescence. It's not really what it is, but to cultivate etheric sight, one of the best ways to do that is to do just tattva gazing. You don't even have to scry. Just stare at them for 30 seconds without blinking, and do that a couple of times a day. I used to do it 3 times, but yeah, that was, I feel like everything kind of tied into each other very nicely, So, somebody have any questions?
A question. I was wondering. I don't remember. I had a conversation with Douglas Gabriel at one point. He's big into Steiner and anthroposophy and all that, but he was the one that pointed this book out to me, and I'm trying to remember if he was talking about this book or the Tattvas, but he was saying they can be dangerous in some ways. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or insight into that, or maybe.
I mean, all this stuff can be dangerous, so what's his reasoning?
I don't know. I don't remember.
And I think probably what he's talking about is not so much, right? Because Ram Prasad in that book, Nature's Finer Forces, is not talking about the Tattvas the same way we are. He's talking about them more so, like I was mentioning before, with the Tattvic tides and that kind of stuff. And that does correspond to etheric energies, the Tattvic tides, and knowing how and when to ride them. And again, this etheric component that kind of ebbs and flows, this is what Levy was referring to when he was talking about the astral light. This is what Blavatsky was talking about when she talked about the astral light, and many others, but they all had the same thing to say. This can fucking kill you. This will destroy you. And a lot of it ties back to the mental health issues, the possibility there for, is there a strand I can pull to unravel this thing? Because that walking around after cultivating that type of power can be very, very jarring if your organism hasn't been accustomed. It's like sending 1,000 volts through like a 90 volt receiver. Sometimes, it's not always. That's why we do things like the exercise, the exercise of the middle pillar, and the concentration on the aura and things like this, is to fit our etheric vehicle for that shifa, right? That dumping of the divine light and things like this. So, they all said that this can take over, not only with the mental health, but with sex. This stuff can turn you into a sex fiend in many, many ways. And if it goes dark, who knows? But I've seen lots of instances of both. I mean, there's been instances of like schizophrenia from.
Why is it? What is the reasoning? Is it just because it's the same energy? Like, why is it a sexual?
It's because it's effectively, it is the way that the universe creates, is through this akashic or etheric substrate. It is the womb of Nut. It is the thing from which all other things come. we don't have that idea anymore because we think of space as a vacuum. Since Aristotle up into Tesla, they were thinking of it as a fucking, it was filled with ether, it was luminiferous, and it was actually not, the stuff didn't travel, things, the elements, they didn't travel through the ether. They were all latent in it. And they were stimulated. Ken Wheeler calls this the reverse hysteresis of the ether, the induction of the ether to produce a particular manifestation of either magnetism or electricity, and light and things of this nature. So they thought that this is the creative substrate. Now, let's think about sexual energy. What is the biological purpose for sex? Creation. Okay, not fun, not love, not connection. The fucking biological purpose is creation. Okay, so anytime you and they teach you techniques, particularly if you're an addict of several kinds, how to sublimate that energy, and not right. This is why the Buddhist monks do this: here and no lower. It's because this is, you have to. Dion Fortune talks about it in the Circuit of Force. I'm going to give a course on all of her magic in July, probably up until September. It's going to be full intensive, but she talks about ways to redirect and sublimate the force, and you can use that to create music. You can use that to create art, but enough of that will do one of two things. It'll turn you into Dionysus, or it'll turn or the Bacchae, or the Maenads, the sex crazed women who tear Orpheus limb from limb and rip his head off. That is to say, it will create mania, or it will turn you into a satyr kind of thing. So it's not that will definitely happen, but there is a risk, particularly if you're not somebody who can control themselves. And that's why there's such an emphasis in orders that I think are doing it right on fucking control yourself. You want to do magic and you can't even hold the door for people. You can't stop jerking off. It's like, just how are you going to do this stuff? You're a mess. Your life's a time management crisis. Well, who do you think you are? What do you think this is going to do for you? So it's, and it sucks. I'm sure for many people who hear me talk like that, but it's like, I'm done with the flowery horse shit. I was done 10 fucking years ago with it. But the truth, this is the truth of the matter. You want to talk to people who are experienced, we're all going to say some version of this. Am I wrong? I mean,
no, you're not wrong. Yeah. I wanted to add one thing. Someone said up there about changing shape again. So in God form, I find the God forms help contain. Also, you notice we're not in the Golden Dawn tradition using just Hebrew once we're in the Tatra. We're also using the 3 secret names of God, born upon the banner of the whichever direction you're working in. North for the Earth one. And that's really interesting because in a way, maybe we're using these Tattva shapes to enter the watchtower, right? Like the shapes and the colors without any conditioning lead us into a realm, then we condition that realm or invoke the forces into that realm. But also visualize entering these realms in God form can be a protective and containment tool. Also, it can really affect how spirits react to you, especially if you always visualize yourself in God form larger than anything you meet. That's another little trick, handy trick, which I think comes from the tradition. Maybe not, who knows? I can't remember at this point. But visualizing, if you see a spirit, make sure you visualize yourself as bigger than that spirit. And that can be a helpful tool to get the spirits to interact with you in a germane manner. So someone's just come in with a super chat. Thank you everyone for the super chats and the memberships and everything you guys throw our way. It all really helps given the work we're doing. It all really helps. You have no idea. Every bit helps. We really appreciate it. Paracelsus talks about transmuting the enseminis semen into aura seminalis, sperm of imagination. Do we need internal alchemy for scrying, or can we just raw dog it?
Well,
sounds like a question for Mr. Baker.
This why? Because it's talking about semen? No. This goes back to what I was saying before.
It's a party
that
now.
Iamblichus was talking about. the way that you receive the gods really is through the imaginal, the fantasticon. At least one of the ways, probably one of the preliminary ways, and that our ability to receive them, it's like finally calibrating and tuning like a, I don't know, a radio dial or something. The really like, and there are ways to do this. There are multiple ways to attack this, but there's really only one thing to be done, and that is to heal, purify, and strengthen the luminous body. So I don't know if you need it or not, but the texts affirm that it will only get truer, better. Darker things will not be able to enter and deceive you because you have more of these etheric defenses. And if anything, that's what alcohol and drugs usually, what they do first and foremost is they literally, like, imagine you have like a castle wall around you. That's your etheric, you really the outermost boundaries of your sphere of sensation, your aura, what we would technically consider your aura. I practice, I teach this stuff. I mean, I've had Sky and Meg in my living room showing them how to see and feel energy and things like this. I've had a lot of success with this and a lot of practice. I've probably seen one at tops 2 people in my life that have a completely enclosed auric field. Most of the time it's splotchy, it's patchy. You can see the outline, but there's not that full egg there. And I don't know if it has to do with what's in the water or what's in the food or what our mental diet, what we're consuming through there, but there are holes here. The issue that I have in, actually, maybe I might be the least equipped person to answer this question, because I started Qigong and the Golden Dawn like a week apart. So I didn't realize it. I heard somebody say that Qigong was the fountain of life, the fountain of youth. So I'm like, all right, let me just find a guy to do that with. And it turned out being this little Thai guy. It was very, very intense. And so I started doing that. Qigong comes out of Taoist internal alchemy. It's all working with the luminous body at the end of the day, or at least at the end of the sequence. So I was doing both at the same time. And I didn't even realize it. So I don't know. There might be people that have never done a jot of energy work and are fantastic at scrying.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think that we need the inseminis for scrying work. Or really many spiritual techniques, but it certainly can. I mean, if you're sublimating that creative energy to a higher state, a more spiritual state, then yeah, I mean, of course, that's going to supercharge whatever you're doing. If you do that and then you do magic, it's gonna turbocharge what you're doing. If you're trying to, I don't know, remove something else within you and doing an operation for that, then having that extra energy can be useful, but not necessary. I don't think either. But one area where that internal alchemy can be really good is union with God. Any kind of practice where the objective is raising yourself up and uniting in some sense with God, that process accompanying that can be very useful, because it's a form of attraction, if you think about it, when we're trying to reunite with the divine. But that's probably going a bit off track. But I really enjoyed, Frater, I see your presentation on the tattvas, and I'm guilty of underestimating the importance of them. However, I will say that they make a fantastic point of concentration for dharana. If anyone's done Raja Yoga before, the stage of meditation where you need to concentrate on a single point, having a nice, simple, elementary shape is really good for building up that skill. So that's another one of the many uses of the tattvas. But yeah, I think everyone's done some really great presentations today.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, brother. I'll send you the three of you my the 45-minute long exercise recording when I finish editing it. It's almost done. It's and then I'll get it posted to every one of my members on my YouTube. Which
Nice.
I never had any success with Patreon and stuff, but apparently people like my YouTube. So sign up to my YouTube, sign up to everyone's YouTubes, and or wherever they're most active. I put most of my attention to that now because that's what people seem to have wanted from me. Let's wrap up, with a little shout out what we're all up to, what we're all doing. Ike's got a ton of stuff in the works, I know. Yeah. Unless you guys want to drag on a bit longer. I don't mean drag on you. I just feel bad because it's so late for you, and
no, you don't
I'm
don't feel
hungry
bad for me. Don't feel
Friday
bad for
the
me.
13th. Let's give a shout out to Jacques de Malay and the
there
and
you
the
go.
Brothers
Yeah.
of the Knights Templar. We should have done that last month on Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's true. We should have brought
but
in the whole Templar piece. Oh
Yeah,
well,
the
let's go
Templars
for
are-
another hour. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay, so we'll go around. I've got 2 courses going on right now. They're on alternating Mondays. The first one just began. The first session was this past Monday, the 9th. It's called Techniques of Greco-Egyptian Theurgy. I did a field immersive excursion on the ground in Upper and Lower Egypt last October with 20 participants, and this is kind of a distillation of all the stuff we did: history, theory, and practice of ancient theurgic or Greco-Egyptian ritual, specifically theurgic. So it has the flavor of higher magic, temple magic, some people call it. I've got another class that's starting this Monday, and I've got a discount if you register before the class. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Astrological herbalism for witches, magicians, and alchemists. This is going to be a really awesome course because I just finished writing a book called The Astrological Gardener's Companion. I co-wrote it with my fiance, and so this stuff is all really, really fresh, and it's just going to give you so many different techniques of working with herbs magically. Now, just reach out to me. All these things are recorded, by the way. If you can't make the live sessions, they're shared. You can watch them as many times as you want. The Theurgy course comes with a 90-page workbook that I wrote for that trip. You'll get that, presentation slides, syllabi. And the astrological herbalism class comes with an herbiary of over 30 magical herbs, their uses, correspondences, so on and so forth. So that's what I got going on. Check me out at Arcanum. Got some podcasts coming up, and hopefully these guys keep bringing me back and allowing me to occupy this little tiny quadrant of the screen.
We'll keep bringing you back. I think that me and Ike potentially might be going on Occult Rejects with David Heim Smith coming up.
We are.
So that'll be badass.
That'll be crazy. Wow. With David. Man.
So there's
David.
that.
Etherica.
I think, yes, Etherica. I've been dripping out some of the previous episodes. I think there's like 21 or 2 now on YouTube, but we've got like 40 on the Patreon. So if people like any of that, definitely go there because it's just a shitload of awesome stuff. It looks like there's a Friday the 13th in November. Maybe we could talk about Templar stuff on that one. But yeah, what else? Besides that, I just wanted to throw this out there real quick. This guy is one of this Hereward Carrington guy that was the co-author of that book, Astral Projection one. Allegedly, this guy was in correspondence with Israel Regardie, Aleister Crowley, and these people. So you may have had some Golden Dawn influence. Just wanted to throw that out there before because it's something I wanted to touch on. But besides that, I don't know. I can't think of anything else. For me, Philosophical Minds podcast, the Erica podcast, and appreciate everybody.
All right. Well, in terms of myself, go to Lifting the Lamp, my YouTube channel. That's my biggest platform at the moment, where I'm trying to build the most. Still, in terms of things that I've got coming up, something really exciting is happening with me, and that is that I'm going to release a book soon, self-published. Thanks very much. It's actually a very important step in my path that I published this book. It's a compilation of communications that I've received doing similar kinds of techniques to some of the things we've discussed tonight. In this case, a lot of Enochian magic, particularly the Jebethal ritual, and some work with my holy guardian angel, and some other things, has produced a book of knowledge, which I will be publishing very soon. And it looks like I've got the final proof. I'm just reading through it in a physical copy to make any final changes that are needed. But around Easter, it'll be ready. So there'll be a period where I'm promoting it and then releasing it. So keep a lookout for that, and I'll be making announcements about that on my channel.
Congratulations! That's very exciting and a much needed addition to the corpus of that field of study for sure. Very exciting to see that, and I'm a big fan of independent publishing, brother. We don't all need to go with Llewellyn and inner traditions and all that stuff, though it's, it's not a bad thing. I say that as I'm working on something for Llewellyn, which I can't talk about. I'm one of those idiots who, like, instead of finishing one book at a time, I'm working for the last 5 years on 4 books at once. So I'm one of those idiots who's going to have like 4 books done at once. And it's just, that's a bad way to release stuff, but that's probably how it'll be. Whenever I get around to finishing it. It's hard with all the other things we have going on, namely which Enochia Con and the Arcane Research Society. These guys will be there in Austin, Texas, November 6th through 8th. We have a huge building downtown. We got the run of the place for 3 days straight. 22 presenters, I think, 16 of them in person, full dining hall, green room, ritual practice room, exclusive workshops for only 20 members per workshop. You can go to EnochiaCon or ArcaneResearchSociety.com to check that out and join now while early bird registration is still on. They'll also included with that is a May-June workshop, which won't be on Enochian magic, also in Austin, Texas. That'll be more on like a bit of chaos magics and some other stuff. I can't say anything more until I confirm a few things, but stay tuned. And other than that, if you want to, I'm releasing a lot of new stuff into my Enochian curriculum this year. And it's not just a course, it's a curriculum. So I keep adding everything I do in Enochian work to it. So if you sign up to that, you keep getting everything as I grow and learn and share more with me. You don't have to buy anything. So you just register that, go to EnochianGrimoire.com if you want to sign up for that. Or if you want to study magic with me in general, go to HermeticMysterySchool.com. There's a free membership tier you can join and get a bunch of free courses and other cool stuff. And we have lots of fun. And of course, my podcast, Hermetic Podcast, go give it a good review on Apple podcasts and Spotify. Much appreciated. Magic Without Fears, Hermetic Podcast. Thank you. And thanks everyone. Thanks you guys for doing this. It takes a lot of effort for us all to have this little quadrivium of magic, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to get to hang out with you guys. I noticed last time, Eleftheria, someone made a comment, was like, yo, Eleftheria, these aren't your guys. And I wanted to address that, but we didn't have time. I wanted to be like, dude, that's exactly the point. Like, screw the echo chamber. But at the same time, if you think we're not sort of in the same genre, well, you have another thing coming, because we're about as much in the same niche as you can be in the spirituality sector of life.
Agreed.
But
Yeah.
if they meant it in other ways, that's fine. I mean, obviously we're not as pretty as you. Maybe Sky is, but you know, we're working on it.
Yeah, you and I are bald.
We're bald.
They have beautiful heads of hair.
We're bald, below 6 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything
I'm
TikTok
not 6
hates.
feet, don't worry.
No, I know, but you know.
Well,
we
gang.
should stop this. We should stop this.
Well, you know what? Actually, what's really funny is that as we like passed into hour 3 of the last of the first one we did, or like maybe hour 4. Sky thought we were at 3 hours. We were at fucking 4 hours.
Yeah, I know.
But I got like all these messages from people I know that was just like the podcast got better as you guys just got fucking tired and and just the bullshit dropped and it just got wacky. People love it, you know. But it was really great to sort of lead the charge for this one. Eleftheria, I guess maybe you're it, right? Tag for
front man next time.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, gang. Have a good night.
Yeah, we
Everybody.
like and subscribe, everybody. Like and subscribe. Thank you, bros. We will see each other soon. Conks on packs, light and extension.
Pow.
Pa-pow.